Good morning and welcome to City Hall. We'll get started here momentarily. Before we call the meeting to order, if you happen to have a cell phone in your pocket or purse or wherever, if you would silence it at this time, that would be greatly appreciated. If you're here and you want to speak to any item on the agenda, outside there are sign-up sheets. If you would go out there and give us that information, we will call you at the appropriate time. With that being said, if you'd all stand, we'll have the invocation and pledge allegiance to the flag. The Reverend Aaron Krieger from the Crown Heights Christian Church. Reverend, thank you for being with us today, sir.
Thank you all. Let us begin in a word of prayer. O holy and gracious God, we come with spirits of thanksgiving. Thanksgiving for all that you have done for us in this place. Thanksgiving for what we celebrate this week, our freedom and our independence. Help us to be in that same spirit of healthy debate and unity as we come together and make decisions and plans for our great city. We thank you and we praise you for all that you do in our lives. Amen.
Thank you, sir. David, would you lead us in the pledge allegiance to the flag, sir?
Please face the flag. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a proclamation. This is Parks and Rec Month, and with that in mind, we want to honor our Parks and Recs and have the director, Doug Cupper, come forward, please, sir.
Spread out behind us.
As you can tell, Doug has brought some cheerleaders along with him, and you'll see the importance of that in just a moment. Clerk, if you would read the proclamation.
Whereas July is Park and Recreation Month, and parks and recreation programs are a vital part of communities across America, including Oklahoma City. Whereas the Oklahoma City Parks and Recreation Department provides green spaces and dynamic facilities and programs so citizens may achieve a high quality of life, contributing to the overall well-being of the community, its economy, and culture. Whereas parks and recreation programs provide exercise and wellness opportunities to aid citizens with disease prevention by encouraging habits that improve their health. Whereas parks and recreation programs contribute to economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, attraction and retention of businesses and employees, and crime reduction. Whereas parks and recreation lands improve air and water quality, protect groundwater, provide vegetative buffers, and produce sustainable habitat for wildlife. Whereas parks and recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community, allowing children and adults to connect with nature through primitive and manicured landscapes. Whereas Oklahoma City also recognizes the contributions of Parks and Recreation Department employees and volunteers who help people relax, connect with others, and enjoy the many benefits of parks and recreation programs and facilities. Now, therefore, David Holt, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim the month of July as Parks and Recreation Month in Oklahoma City.
Thank you. Let's give the Parks and Rec people a hand. And Doug, you've got some fine young people up here besides your staff. How about making a few comments and tell the folks why these young people are up here?
Thank you, Mr. McAtee. I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank the council for recognizing July as Parks and Recreation Month. Nationwide, July is recognized as Parks and Recreation Month. And I couldn't think of a better way to receive this proclamation than to have these young men stand up here with me today. Parks and Recreation is really about these guys that are up here and the girls that participate in our programs, the youth of tomorrow. These guys are important. For the first time in the history of Oklahoma City, we have a championship team in the President's Cup in soccer. The regional champions are standing here with me today. First time a team from Oklahoma City has ever won the regional championship, and their next goal, next week, they're on their way to Nashville to play in the national tournament, and we're going to have them back here because they're going to win that. Right, you guys? Our competitive program is only 2 years old, so you can imagine how dynamic this team is, and it couldn't have happened without a volunteer coach. Where's the coach at? Oh! We're so proud of the fact that the City of Oklahoma City Parks and Recreation Department, it has one of the few competitive organizations in the country. Usually it's other organizations that step up and have it. We saw the need to have a competitive program for these young men, their brothers and sisters, their cousins, their, some cases, uncles and aunts and everybody else. We wanted to have that program. The program is housed at our Window Wisenhunt Sports Complex, which is the east side of Woodson Park. It's in the south central section of the city. These guys know how to play soccer. We're looking forward to see them play college ball. We're looking forward to them playing professional ball. And who knows, their sisters may be playing World Cup in a few years as well. So, right? So, again, we want to thank the council. We want to thank the Mayor Pro Tem for recognizing July as Parks and Recreation Month. I really, truly want to recognize these young men, the coach, and my staff that have been able to put this program together to bring a championship to our city. So thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Play hard. Play well. Nice growth. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Congratulations. Good job. Good job. Way to go. Good job. Go get him.
Okay, let's call our meeting to order. First off, from the Office of the Mayor, we have to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for June 18th and approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for June 4th. We have a motion to approve. A second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, a request for uncontested continuances.
Yes, sir. So we've got one that's listed on the agenda as item 9A6, and that's on page 29 of the agenda. We also have on page 30 of the agenda under item 9D1, the applicant is asked to withdraw this item. Also on page 30, item 9D2, Councilwoman Nice has asked that we defer this item for 2 weeks. So that would move it to July the 16th. On under dilapidated structures, this is on page 32, item number 9H1D, 2220 Southwest 24th Street. And we're going to strike this item. All the items that I'll list here will be stricken, and I'll give you the reason. The owner is repaired on this one. On item E, 3500 Northwest 26th Street, we need to re-notify the owner. Continuing on page 32 on item 9I1, item A, the owner has secured, that's 1614 College Avenue, the owner has secured. Item B, 2615 Fonzio Avenue, is to re-notify the owner. Item D, 2803 North Independence Avenue, the owner has secured. Item E, 12708 Parker Heights Boulevard, the owner has secured. Item G, 1704 Northwest 10th Street, the owner has secured. Item L, 2244 Northwest 15th Street is to re-notify the owner. Item M, 3500 Northwest 26th Street is to re-notify the owner. On page 33 under abandoned buildings, item 9J1A, 2615 Fonzio Avenue is to re-notify the owner. Item C, 12708 Parker Heights Boulevard is to, the owner has secured. Item F, 1704 Northwest 10th Street, the owner is secured. Item H, 2220 Southwest 24th Street, the owner repaired. And then on item I, 3500 Northwest 26th Street is to re-notify the owner. And that's all the items I have.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along, we have some revocable permits that have been requested. Is there anybody here from the Prodigal LLC? If you come forward.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you.
Give us your name and address and tell us about your event.
My name is Billy Walton. I'm at 909 Southwest 40th Street. I'm here to speak on behalf of Downtown Fourth Fest. This is our 7th year to do Downtown Fourth Fest. It's moved around locations. This is the 3rd year that we've been able to partnership with River Sport Adventures in the Boathouse District to host what we believe is Oklahoma City's largest fireworks show on the 4th of July. It's going to be a lot of fun for the city. It's a completely free event. Now the Boathouse and the River Sport Adventures District will actually have their activities open for folks to come and enjoy with the rapids and zip lining and all those amazing things to do. But it is a free event, and we'll have a gigantic fireworks show starting at 9:45 that night on 4th of July. We're wanting to use the Parks parking lot just on the southwest side of Lincoln on the south side of the river to use to actually fire from. We will secure that location with folks to make sure the area is clear and safe for everyone, and just hope that everybody has a great holiday.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Nice.
I know we are looking forward to enjoying the 4th of July, and I will add with you, if you have not zip-lined in the Boathouse District, you must do it on July 4th. And with that, I move for approval for this event.
We have a no motion. A second. Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Thank you, sir. Good luck
Thank you, guys.
to
Have a great day.
Next up, a revocable permit for the Oklahoma State Game Warden Association.
My name is Wade Farrar. My residential address is 4782 Josie Lane, Cashin, Oklahoma 73016. I'm here to represent the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife and the Oklahoma State Game Warden Association both. Coming up the 14th through the 20th of July, we are hosting the North American Wildlife Enforcement Officers Association. That's a long one to get out. Annual conference here in Oklahoma City. It's the first time we've ever hosted it here. That association is made up of every conservation officer in North America is part of that. Currently we have 302 game wardens that are registered that will be here for the conference. The permit covers a fallen officer memorial 5K, specifically honoring Minnesota game warden Eugene Wynn, thrown from his boat April of 2019, responding to a call. The 5K is to honor him, and all the money goes to the game warden museum up in upstate New York. So, and then the permit also covers on the 19th, I believe, is the date. We're having a Wiley Post Park, a game warden skills competition, which is basically a goof-off day for us and our families to come out and play some goofy games and eat some barbecue and just enjoy the day.
What time is the barbecue?
I believe it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Be an early supper.
Well, I'll move for approval for this, and we are looking forward to welcoming everyone to Oklahoma City for this event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have a second? And a second. Any comments? Welcome to Oklahoma City with your event, and we hope you have a great time. Please cast your votes, and it is so approved.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a revocable permit for Ram Racing to hold I Love the 90s 5K. Is there a representative? Yes. You come forward and give us your name and address and tell us about your event.
Hello, my name is Carrie Ralston. My residential address is 17901 Briar Road in Newalla, Oklahoma. I'm representing Ram Racing on Motive, Oklahoma. We're working with a race director who is doing a national I Love the 90s run and has added Oklahoma City to their stock. So this course will be featured in front of Fassler Hall, and it's celebrating all things 90s. We've got a one-of-a-kind Game Boy finisher medal, and all participants will receive I Love the 90s tech shirts. So after the run, it starts at 8 o'clock. We'll have an after-party featured at Fassler Hall. So.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Hammond.
Yes, well, I'm excited to hear about this because as a child of the 90s, I will be excited to see folks hopefully out in like grunge and some other great costumes running. So
we hope it is very festive.
Maybe some plaid. With that, I move for approval.
Appreciate it.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes, and it is approved. Thank you.
You guys have a
Good
great
luck to you.
holiday. Thank you.
Okay, let's recess the council meeting and call to order the convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, and we have 7 items. We have a motion. A second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes, and it is so ordered. Let's adjourn the OC MFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. And here we have 9 items.
We have one presentation on this also. We have the budget on for the Public Property Authority, and Doug Dowler is here to make a presentation on the budget.
Right, Doug, if you'd come forward and present on the budget.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Doug Dowler, the Budget Director for the City. I'm pleased to present to you the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority for FY20. The City is the sole beneficiary of the authority, and as such, there's also an item under the consent agenda to receive the OCPPA budget. The PPA budget totals $56.7 million and has 4 primary revenue sources: golf course revenues, transfers from the general fund, transfers from the hotel tax fund, and then fund balance of the remainder in the fund from prior years. When we look at the budget by function, the largest areas for capital at the fairgrounds. 3 cents of the 5.5 cent hotel tax rate is dedicated to supporting capital improvements at the fairgrounds. Using the dedicated funding, revenue bonds have been sold that are repaid through the hotel tax. Those bonds were sold by the OCPPA, and so each month, both the portion dedicated to fairgrounds capital and the portion for tourism promotion are transferred to the PPA and the trustee bank. They take out what's needed for the debt service on those bonds and then return the remainder back to the hotel tax fund. That portion that's not needed kind of inflates the budget a little bit, so you'll see next year we anticipate transferring $14.7 million from the hotel tax fund to the PPA, and we expect about $6.4 million of that to go back to the hotel tax fund. But that's just part of the requirements of the revenue bonds, that all revenue be transferred to the PPA so they can take out what's needed, and the remainder goes back to the hotel tax fund. And so that's the largest area of the PPA budget. The next largest category is for MAPS-related contracts and capital. That totals $16.7 million. Some of the areas that are funded here include the contract for SMG to manage the Cox Convention Center and Chesapeake Arena. There's also funding for pre-opening activities of the MAPS 3 Convention Center. And other MAPS-related activities include in the PPA include the lease revenue from the Bricktown Ballpark, funding for the distributed antenna system for cell service at the Chesapeake Arena, naming rights for the Chesapeake Arena, and dredging on the Oklahoma River. The third largest function funded through the PPA is golf courses at $10.5 million. The largest source of revenues is, of course, green fees and surcharges paid by golfers who use the courses. Those total $4.5 million. If you add golf cart rentals, that brings the total to about $7 million. The general fund transfers in about $900,000 to pay for water at the courses and about $300,000 to subsidize operations at Stewart Golf Course, the city's 9-hole golf course. And then there are several other functions supported by the PPA, such as our third-party natural gas program, the city's support for the Civic Center Foundation, some business improvement district funding, and some sports facilities related activity, and those functions make up about 15% of the total. So again, the overall budget is $56.7 million for FY20, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on the PPA budget.
Thank you, sir. Questions for? Seeing none, thank you, sir. That concludes the item presentation and the items for the Oklahoma City PPA. Action by the council. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Let's adjourn the OC PPA and reconvene as the OC Economic Trust, Environmental Trust. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Let's adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene as the council meeting with the consent docket. We have a motion and a second to receive the items with the need of special attention. Which items would you like to discuss? I'm sorry, say again.
EJ.
EJ?
And then I would like the following items. Well, I don't know so much that I want to pull them, but I would like discussion on them.
That's fine.
Okay. AK 13567. It's all the districts. AM AT1 AU1 AV1 BA and CJ1.
Have you got those two?
Not all of them.
No, do you need more? Can you say it again?
You got it.
AV1.
What were the last two?
BA and CJ1. And before that was AV1, AU1, AT1, AM, and then AK 1, 3, 5, 6, and 7. That's it.
Okay, if seeing no others, let's take the councilman's first if we can.
That's fine.
And then we'll come back.
We do have a citizen
Okay.
asked for 7CR5.
You ready to go? Go ahead. We're going to take yours first.
Oh, we're going to take mine first?
Yeah.
Okay, so is that AK1 then? Yes, I just, first I'm really excited to see these districts taking time to continue to improve the quality of life for the neighborhoods surrounding them. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about what are some general uses each one of these districts might use these funds for. That's all. The reason why is I just think these districts have become kind of a cultural touchstone for the city, and it's really rejuvenated the city, the inner city. And I just want more of the public who might not, there are people who might not have even been to the Paseo. I know that might sound shocking, but I just want to hear a little bit more about how these districts responsibly steward these funds and what kind of services they're providing and how they're rejuvenating our inner city.
Hello, Councilman James Cooper. It's Tin Nguyen, President of the Asian District Cultural Association. Councilman, Councilwoman. Thank you so much, first and foremost, representing a lot of our districts back here. Thank you so much for this economic funding for all of our districts, and the funds that we do receive, we plan on utilizing for beautification projects in the area. Working to make our neighborhoods more walkable, safe, and better environment for improving the quality of life. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next.
Next. Oh, it's like a song, actually. AM. I just wanted to hear a little bit more. I'm very excited about this because I believe this fits in with the mayor's task force for homelessness. And I just wanted to kind of provide a little bit of an update on this particular service agreement that's going to help us, what it's going to help us accomplish.
So we're going to have a presentation on this one?
Yes.
So you okay if we just hold it?
I am great with that.
We'll do that one? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You keep still with me? That's great. And then AT1. I just wanted the residents who live in this area maybe to hear a little bit more about this resurfacing project, what they can expect, the timeline for it, for instance.
Thank you, Councilman Eric Winger, Public Works Director for Oklahoma City. So AT1, the project is actually already complete.
Oh.
So this is the final acceptance of this project. It was actually a public-private partnership with some of the businesses that were in that area, so they contributed 50% of the funds to help with that street resurfacing. So this is your final action today. The work's complete and the road's in new condition.
That's wonderful. Good job. And then this might still relate to you because we're going to AU1. Can you talk a little bit about this traffic impact study? I'm curious to know a little bit more.
So we've got a presentation on this one, too.
Really? Did it say that in the agenda?
It doesn't.
Okay,
No.
just making
I should have said that when we started off so you were aware.
Okay, I am a teacher. I do know how to read, so I was like, uh-oh.
It's a test to see if you're alert.
Will there also be one on AV1 then about the stormwater analysis?
No.
No. Oh, bingo.
You got one.
I'm just wanting a little bit clarification, update on that, what we would expect from such an analysis.
So the item 81 is a contract renewal with actually one of our consulting laboratories to actually assist with the needs of the city from time to time when we need laboratory testing for stormwater analysis. And so this is just something that we do in-house as a part of the Public Works Stormwater Quality Program. We don't do these tests in-house, so we need this contract to actually perform those and provide results for future reports, testing, and needs of the city.
Thank you, Eric. And does BA have to do with you? Yeah, the streetscape improvements along Northwest 23rd between North Blackwelder and North Kentucky and Northwest 25th.
On
and
BA.
North Blackwelder? On BA?
BA.
Is that, it's a Ward 2 project I noticed. And I'm just curious what the streetscape improvement, I knew we had done some arterial resurfacing there, but I wasn't so clear on streetscape.
So this work is Amendment 2 for an engineering contract that was to do the design of that work. It generally was a widening project on 23rd and 25th, excuse me. It's general streetscaping, so ADA, sidewalk, enhancements, those types of improvements. But the item today, the work is actually already complete on this one as well.
Okay.
And this is really just a reconciliation of some A&E services that were incorporated. So the engineer on this project had an error in the plans, and this actually reduces the amount of the engineering contract by $14,511 to compensate the city for that necessary redesign and change. But this work on these streets is also complete.
So that's, okay, so what I've been seeing, that's what this is, that's done. Great. And then, are you the cool guy who gets to hang out with CJ1? Yes, this was the maintenance of the medians on North Classen. I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about that. I don't know who might, is that a planning?
We will get some. Yes.
Okay.
It's Doug. So we'll get someone out to answer that one.
Okay.
If you want to move to the next one, we'll get
And then
one.
you'll be surprised to know, that's it for me.
That's all?
That's all.
Here's
And
Doug.
here's Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Moving between that room and this room, I missed the actual question, so apologize for that.
So it's on CJ1.
the landscape improvements and maintenance along Classen Boulevard from Northwest 16th to 49th Street. I'm just curious if you can kind of tell me a little bit more about what's going on there.
We have an agreement with the OKC Beautiful, and they've been managing and maintaining those medians for quite a few years now, and that's what this agreement is for, is to continue that. Every July 1, we have to re-up these type of agreements, and that's what this is, to continue our relationship and the great work that OKC Beautiful does, especially in this section of Classen.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for the good work as well. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Councilman Hammond had more.
Councilwoman? And
Yeah. So with BJ, I was just curious if we could have a staff present on kind of what this is about. I know we've been briefed about it as council, and this is sort of a second or third step in the process of paying these funds to the NCAA, but I just wanted for the public's kind of edification to know what the funds are being used for, kind of the history of the issue.
Right. So this was money that was owed by All Sports Association to the NCAA for the Women's College World Series, for the 2019 Women's College World Series. As they closed their doors, they were not able to make this final payment. Working through this with legal, we determined that we could make this payment to make sure that the NCAA was made whole for their project through the Convention and Visitors, or through the promotions fund from the hotel tax. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, their subcommittee, the promotion subcommittee reviewed this and approved, authorized the payment to make sure that we were able to continue support for this event. And then it went through the CVB and was approved, and now it's coming back to the council. What this item does today is actually provides the contract authority and the budget authority to be able to do this. That's why it's set at $306,000, just rounded to $306,000. The actual payment has been made by the Convention and Visitors Bureau of $305,184.72. This promotions program is really a reimbursement program. The CVB processes it. They work through the promotions, do a review, they process payment, and then they submit an invoice to the city, and we pay from the promotions funds to reimburse the CVB. And so there'll be a reimbursement for the exact amount of that payment.
Okay. And so I guess my question is, so All Sports was an independent operator outside of the city?
Yes. Correct.
And we were not legally liable for this
That's
money?
correct. This was a matter of valuing the NCAA and what they do to bring this event to Oklahoma City. As we evaluated it, we said, you know, we were determined that even though All Sports wasn't, they weren't representing the city ourselves, and we didn't have a legal obligation, that there was a determination at that point that we would go ahead and make that whole from the promotions fund because of the fact of the money that was owed to them for the event.
Okay.
I think the important thing is that we appreciate the NCAA's patience. We appreciate all they do for Oklahoma City in bringing this event to our town, and we're very proud of the event.
It brings a lot of people into Oklahoma City, and it's a long-standing relationship we had, and we felt like, you know, making this whole, and the CVB supported that too, making this whole with this relationship with the NCAA was really important.
Was there any discussion at the CVB's commission about, was anybody kind of skeptical of why we should be doing this?
Yeah, there were questions about it, certainly, to look at, is this something that we want to step into? Are there other ways that we could pursue this? And as we evaluated all the options that were there, we actually had auditors come in and look at All Sports books as they were closing their doors so that we knew what amount was there. So we had an external auditor that we used come in and take a look at that to help us determine the amount that was owed. And we've evaluated every option that we had and felt like this was our best alternative.
I think my concern is that we might be setting a precedent for these kind of not local, outside, I guess it's a nonprofit, but, you know, they make billions of dollars a year. And to me, this is a small number that maybe they could absorb in their operations, and I understand the argument of, you know, wanting to keep a good relationship with them, but I just wanted to make sure the public knows, because for me, it just is worrisome that we're setting a precedent for other folks to make the same case, whereas this money might have been used, I think, by the CVB to promote other events when, you know, I think everyone knows that this softball tournament happens here. It's well promoted. So that's just, I just want to make that clear to the public. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we have two presentations On the first presentation, we have Jared Shadid with the Planning Department to present on the contract for the consultant services on the comprehensive plan on homelessness in Oklahoma City.
Yes, I'm Jared Shader with the Oklahoma City Planning Department, Community Development Division. I'm the Homeless Programs Planner for the City of Oklahoma City. Let's give you a little background about why we're doing this. I think some of you may know we released our 2019 annual point-in-time homeless census at the beginning of last month. Those numbers didn't really change too much from last year. They came up a little bit. But last year is, those numbers last year are kind of what part of that problem is. Our unsheltered count last year came up about 50% to 394. That's the highest it's been in several years. And what that means is when we take our totals, it's counting people coming from 3 different locations. There are people who are staying in emergency shelter on the night of the count. Those are places like those are places like City Rescue Mission and Salvation Army. Transitional housing, which is 2-year housing with supports. A lot of these are sobriety-based programs. And then people who are literally living outside under bridges or in camps. And that's the number that came up. That's the most visible population and usually the people who have the most problems. In addition to that, we've also continuously had trouble locating youth and serving couch homeless youth and coming up with the preventative measures to keep people from falling into homeless in the first place. And those are just the problems we know of. And our last 10-year plan wrapped up several years ago, so we need a new strategy to help address these problems. So the mayor convened a task force on homelessness. First meeting was back in April, and we announced there that we would be locating a consultant to carry on this strategic planning process. We put together a selection committee from task force members from City Care, the Homeless Alliance, Inasmuch Foundation, Arnold Foundation, the Housing Authority, and the City of Oklahoma City. And they reviewed several proposals based on an RP we had released, and then heard several interviews, and they unanimously selected Analytic Insight. AI is an organization out of Maine. They've conducted this kind of study several times for other organizations throughout the nation, and they also conduct work on other studies for needs for other vulnerable populations like senior citizens and low-income families. Provided everything goes smoothly, which right now it is, the contract should come before you for approval on the 16th, and then a representative from AI should be at the next task force meeting on the 19th. That is Friday the 19th at 1:30 at the public library, and they're going to go over their process with how they're going to carry this out. And in short, what that process entails is they're going to do a complete evaluation of our homeless services system to determine gaps and needs initially, and then they're going to work with the task force over 12 months to come up with strategies to address those gaps and needs and help us reduce our numbers even further. And this is made possible by a generous donation by the Inasmuch Foundation, who gave a donation of $100,000 to the city to carry out this process. So if you have any other questions, that's pretty much where we're at right now.
Thank you. Any questions for you?
I saw, I think it was yesterday or the day before in the front page of the paper about end homelessness in 5 years, and there's a new homeless study out. I think it was created by Governor Henry, a task force or group that studied homelessness. Do you know much about that? And
yeah, that was
Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that's a statewide plan, and it's actually just in this beginning process. It's the Governor's Interagency Council on Homelessness. That organization was started under Henry. This plan is now started under us. They actually did a 10-year plan which started under Henry as well. That one also has wrapped up. It was sort of a federal requirement or recommendation that communities do 10-year plans.
I guess the question I have is, does any portion of the study address or discuss Oklahoma City?
It's hard to say yet. I mean, it will because it's a statewide study.
Yeah.
I would think it's going to have to because we see the highest numbers between us and Tulsa. We get the highest numbers of people come for services because there's more services here than there are in rural areas. So it's going to have to address that issue.
Okay.
So it would be, I think, impossible for it not to address it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the work of the task force and then Jared's commitment to dealing with these issues and the leadership that he provides for us for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Jared? Thank you, sir.
So the next item that we had a presentation on was item AU, and this is really a first investment on the street side of the traffic or the impact fees, and Eric's going to present on these traffic impact studies that have been completed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Eric Winger, Public Works Director for Oklahoma City. Exciting for us to present today. These are going to be the preliminary and initial reports for the traffic impact studies, a program that was initiated some time ago, but we're finally to a point where we're able to present today and talk a little bit about some of the upcoming projects that are being recommended for your consideration. These are actually 4 items in your agenda packet, so this is 7AU 1, 2, 3, and 4, so this presentation will cover each of those items. When we look at the background, I will talk a little bit more about impact fees. There's also a parks component to the impact fees that I'm not presenting on today. It's a separate item that's being overlooked and managed by the Parks Department with Doug Cupper. So we're specifically talking about traffic, and we'll also talk a little bit about the history, the overview, the initial reports, the recommended projects, and then some next steps. So when we look back at the history, you'll see that this timeline that is in the middle of this page began in January 2016 when we actually introduced the concept of impact fees to the City Council. There was a lot of discussion. There were actually some changes that were made right up until the April 2016 adoption, but we didn't actually start collecting those fees until January of 2017. When we talk about the impact fees and some of the needs and purposes of those, as Oklahoma City continues to expand, develop, and grow, on the traffic side, we're starting to see that there's impacts to the existing traffic infrastructure. New development goes in. It might be only a 2-lane road. It may not have had signalization. These new developments cause some stress on our traffic network. And so with the collection of the impact fees, which is a fee collected for new construction, does not apply to renovation, but it's for new construction and it's based on the square foot of the new facilities. Anything from a 7-Eleven to an Amazon distribution center, those fees are collected, put into city accounts and retained for future projects related to traffic improvements. And so those fees went into effect on January 2017. We used a portion of those fees to initiate these 4 contracts that I'm discussing today to allow those 4 different traffic engineers to start looking at different areas of the city. And then today we're actually presenting those reports here in July of 2019 for your consideration, and also recommending some projects moving forward with some of the monies collected. When we look at the entire city, so the city being very large, over 600 square miles, it's identified in all the green area that is here. There are 14 different benefit areas, and so these don't align with our council wards. This was a lot of analysis that was done by the planning department, making sure that the areas that the benefit areas would impact, the fees that were collected in those individual areas, the monies retained and used for traffic improvements, or in the case of parks impact fees, parks improvements specific to those areas. So if you were collecting fees, say in benefit area R1, that's in the top left hand of this drawing, you cannot use those monies down in R2. So the monies stay local to that specific benefit area. So that was one of the primary items that was discussed with developers, ensuring that when developments occurred in each of those individual areas, traffic improvements could follow. These are the collections for each of those 14 different benefit areas to date. You're going to see some are a lot more than others. Obviously, there's different areas of growth. Some of the highest areas, you'll see that there are actually 5 different benefit areas now exceeding $1 million in collection of traffic impact fees. But you're going to see there's a number of smaller areas too, including the one at the bottom of the page, Rural 4, that's only collected $176,000 to date. So we do have some disparity between the different benefit areas, but that was expected. Again, with the understanding that as we collect enough money in those areas, we can recommend certain projects. The engineering fees for the contracts that are being done to do the studies are also being pulled from these different benefit areas as well.
That slide says streets. Does that mean, should that say traffic?
It should read traffic, so it is traffic impact.
It's not street.
It can include street improvements, so I think the terminology we're probably mixing a little bit. So when we say streets, it's not just traffic signals. It can be street widening. It can be lane additions. So I would say street and traffic.
It has to be a project that improves the capacity of the street. Yeah. And that's why traffic was one of the first projects, the traffic impact was one of the first projects that we took on.
But for street resurfacing, the money is not included here.
That is correct. So it does not provide for maintenance of streets. It has to increase the capacity, as the city manager noted. So in the packet today and in for your consideration are the initial engineering reports. And some of this, the information that's included, each has an executive summary. But the engineers, and there are 4 different ones, we engaged Walter P. Moore, Olson, Kimley, Horn, and Lee. We also divided up those different impact areas. For example, Walter P. Moore did 4 of them, I-1, I-2, N6, R4. Olson did 3 of them, N4, N5, and R3. Lee did 2 of those, N1 and R1, and Kimley Horn completed the balance, C1, I3, N2, N3, and R2. But each had this same scope of work that you see on this screen. They reviewed the existing traffic needs in each of those independent benefit areas, making a report. So they were using an engineering analysis. They were using portions of our comprehensive plan, Plan OKC, looking at future development. They analyzed the needs in each of the areas for intersections and streets, created potential candidate projects, and then made some recommendations in this initial report. There is a final report pending, but one of the things that we noted with collections being received to date in several of the benefit areas now exceeding $1 million is that we are in a position to go ahead and start expending funds that are not bond and not sales tax. It's the actual impact fees that have been collected. And so included are a number of projects in each of those benefit areas that we could begin today. The project types really fall into 3 categories: widening, reconfiguration, and adding traffic control devices. So here's some examples of what some of those will look like. One of the projects at Reno and Mustang includes widening, and in this case, we're looking at adding dedicated right turn lanes, which will increase the capacity at this particular intersection. So through the engineering analysis, through the use of traffic counts, through future projections and Plan OKC, this is one of the recommended projects for that specific benefit area, but this shows where, again, it's not resurfacing and it's not maintenance. We would actually add the additional traffic controls and improve the throughput of this intersection with the additional lane enhancements. The next is a reconfiguration. In some cases, we find that maybe the existing striping, the existing layout, or the use of the lanes could be improved, and in this case, MacArthur and Interstate 40, looking at restriping for additional right turn lanes. The pavement area is adequate to provide for this reconfiguration, but then also restriping center lines and some of the other turn movements at this intersection. Just another example of a project that's not as much physical construction, but a reconfiguration. Then the last example is when we actually start looking at installation of additional traffic control devices. So at Anderson Road and I-40 eastbound off-ramp, adding a traffic signal at that location to help provide for better enhanced traffic movement and increasing that capacity. So there's 4 reports that are in the packet, as I mentioned. Each of them has an executive summary. Each of them breaks down each benefit area, and most benefit areas recommend 2 to 3 projects in these initial reports. There are a couple of the benefit areas that have very low collections to date, and there aren't project recommendations made. For example, to install a new signal at an intersection in Oklahoma City, the estimated cost is about $300,000. So that really kind of sets that baseline for the amount of monies that need to be collected to do a simple signal enhancement project. But we went ahead and put a list of projects on the screen today just to show what high priority projects are by each of the wards, and I've listed those here. I don't think that most of these will be a surprise for those that travel in these specific areas. Each of these is a critical location that is needing some enhancement. And so these are included in the reports, and upon council's approval of the reports today, we're prepared to actually advance these projects forward very quickly. The engineering contracts that provided for the study can actually provide for some of the improvements, but we also have additional traffic engineers already under contract with the city to do the designs if we have something that's more significant or something that's going to take more time. So looking at next steps, finalizing the design on the recommended projects, constructing those recommended initial projects, we'll then finish the final reports, and those final reports are anticipated to be done by the end of this calendar year. They're then going to have a more comprehensive list of projects in each of the benefit areas, not just the 2 or 3 that are recommended today. And then we will work to continually update the reports, making sure that as new developments come into Oklahoma City, the reports reflect those new developments. As traffic counts and traffic movements change in Oklahoma City, those engineers will keep those reports updated so that we maintain a current list of necessary and needed traffic impact and traffic enhancement projects. We'll be bringing those reports back to the City Council for consideration and approval. And as we bring projects forward, it's intended that we'll be bringing those forward as well. So with that, final engineering reports will compile the data. And again, I mentioned the periodic updates. And with that, I can answer any questions you have about either traffic impact fees, the reports that are in the packet today, or possibly what we're looking at as next steps into the future.
Questions for Eric? Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so when we're talking about traffic impacts, are we thinking about traffic outside of cars?
So it's possible, but I will say that the traffic impact fees as envisioned as a part of the ordinance looked more at vehicular traffic than pedestrian and bike.
Okay, because I think, and I'm curious too, I guess, to learn what our experience has been with adding lanes and widening roads, and whether those traffic counts or the traffic congestion has been alleviated. Do we have any idea of that?
So we have had in the past for the City of Oklahoma City, when we find congestion or an intersection that's no longer functioning properly with, say, a four-way stop that now needs signalization, those have traditionally been funded by bond projects. We have a number of bond projects that are part of the 07 that are all finished, but the 17 includes those. That's been our method of being able to do traffic enhancements, is the bond program, which we only plan about every 10 years. With the impact fees, the idea is, of course, as we create that impact, we're able to address it more readily and more quickly. So the engineers that worked on these looked at those intersections that are currently being impacted that require an improvement. They've either looked at the traffic count, they've been in the field and studied the congestion, and they've come up with this recommended solution specific to alleviate that specific item.
Okay, I think about in my pedestrian mind adding lanes and having, right now, I think when I cross Classen, I'm crossing like 7-8 lanes of traffic. So I get worried when we talk about adding more lanes of traffic, and looking at some of these areas, it looks like there's probably not even sidewalks, so I'm sure people are still walking there, but I'm curious about how we go forward, making sure that we're taking those things into account when we think about traffic, because from things that I read and understand, the data is that when you build more lanes, you get more congestion. The idea of induced demand, that you build it, more people go to that intersection. So I'm just I want to learn how we can make sure we're thinking about other types of traffic and providing other modes of transportation as a potential to alleviate car traffic, I guess, car congestion.
So one of the things that we do in the bond program is we do start making projections in the future for the city where we believe there's going to be some sort of a traffic demand or traffic potential, also using Plan OKC to help provide for that future. There are certain widening projects that we're obviously completing in advance of development. For example, we have a number of widened roads around the Kilpatrick expansion in west and southwest Oklahoma City, knowing that once they complete that interstate expansion, that there will undoubtedly be some induced traffic. And so we do have some widening projects on several streets there. Traffic impact studies aren't really doing that. So I would tell you that the traffic impact studies are designed to, there is a development that goes in, a fee is collected because of that development, the traffic is analyzed, and then if needed, enhancements are added to the system after the fact, not before. So we're trying to address those, and again, address the items that aren't covered in either our bond or other initiatives of the city. So these are absolutely needed. I think that as we address pedestrian and other, say, facilities like bicycle facilities, that's something that we obviously will work very closely with Bike Walk OKC, making sure that for those planned areas for pedestrian enhancements and bicycle enhancements that we incorporate those as well. So it will always be our goal that if we've got overlaying projects in an area where we have maybe a bond project and a sales tax, where we have maybe a street, a bike, or a sidewalk, that we coordinate all those at the same time and don't do those separately.
Eric, when do you think you'll be back to us with further recommendations?
So by the end of the year, we anticipate the final reports being complete and having those back to you. So the list of projects that are included today will be lengthened significantly by the end of the calendar year.
I have a question. Looking from construction as far as analyzing to the end of the project, what is the ballpark figure that we're looking at for different traffic areas that we may want to implement traffic signals or just the traffic improvement?
So each project's really very independent of each other. So I wouldn't say that there's one figure for just intersections and one figure just for right turn lane additions and one figure for other enhancements. So in the report, I think what you'll find is each location that was identified of having a traffic impact and needing a update or an upgrade, those costs are very specific to the need of that particular intersection or that particular road. So I don't have really a one-size-fits-all.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is because when you look at the numbers in the areas, the I-1s and the R4s and the R3s, you're seeing, we saw a difference in the amount of money that is in each area. And looking in a lot of those rural areas, there's a lot of need, more need than some of those other areas. So I guess that's kind of where my concern and my question is.
So the impact fee is really geared towards, again, those benefit areas, making sure that money's collected in that specific area stay in that area. That was how the program was designed and really how the state statutes outline the use of the impact fee. So with that, if there's just a lack of development in a particular benefit area, its collections are going to be a lot lower than a benefit area that's having a lot of development activity.
So the numbers that you see on that report are really based on the collections from development in that area.
Yeah.
And so what we have is when we get into areas where there's not as much development occurring, but we have a need, that's where we have to use geo bonds or other sources to be able to cover the difference.
Craig, it might be beneficial to consider devoting some time to impact fees. We have 3 new council members on who may not be up to speed and gone through the analysis that we went through to come up with these impact fees, and to recognize that they were highly controversial. Were they not among our building community?
Sure.
This was not just
I mean, that's something
casual
we can get a
things.
summary together for the new council members, and something that I don't remember if we had talked about that before when we went through our introductions, but we can get some more information on that, just to talk a little bit more about the information on the background of it. And Eric did a good job of going through the history this morning of kind of the timeline of what we went through, but it was really a long process of getting to the place where we got agreement on having the impact fees. And the way we saw impact fees all along was it was a way to enhance our ability to invest in infrastructure. It's not going to be a standalone. It can't take care of all the growth, but the hope is that the growth from development, the increased traffic, particularly in this area, or in parks and trails, is also an area that we have the development helping to pay for a part of that growth and the cost of that growth. And so that's part
I guess the thing is that I'm trying to remember, but aren't there certain state statutory requirements that limit how we can use the funds, where we can use the funds?
That's what Eric was talking about with the benefit areas, that it's, and we drew those working with municipal counselor's office based upon the state law, that it's really the idea that development that happens in an area doesn't mean you're going to get an improvement right in front of your development, but it's going to be in a general area that development contributed into.
Yeah, I think it'd be important if you're going to do a summary and present to all the council members that you show what the state statutes require of us.
Okay.
Please. Thank you.
All right.
I think that's a great idea, but I guess even to add to that, the concern is the fact that, you know, we have a lot of need that we've been talking about for numerous years in certain parts of our city when it comes to traffic and traffic study and traffic improvements, and the fact that we're looking at how the GEO bond has to offset those costs, when even that time frame, you still have to wait. So it's just, you know, that's what my concern is, just the length of time that you have to continuously wait for these improvements, and then you have a road that obviously now needs full resurfacing or repair, and on top of that, you need to look at the traffic signals. So those are the things that I'm looking at as we're talking about this. So if that helps as far as the conversation that we need to be informed about, I'm definitely willing to listen and ready to see what we can do further for the areas that are of concern.
And then I just have 2 follow-ups. One, can you speak a little bit about what Western Avenue and I-44, what's being recommended there? That's Ward 2.
Yep. I printed the executive summaries here because I figured there would be a couple of questions. Let me see if I can find it here quickly. Let me get the full report. I just did not bring that with me to council this morning, that if I could, I can update you with the full report.
Eric's going to scan that real quickly and give you an update.
So I say, I mean, so this is one of the reports, and this is the initial report, right? So, I mean, the final reports obviously have a little more detail than this. They're looking at southbound to eastbound enhancements on Western onto I-44. So the southbound Western, as it crosses Interstate 44, has been noted to have significant congestion in delaying cars that are trying to go eastbound onto I-44. So what's being recommended is to reconfigure possibly some of the lane and striping on that bridge deck that is there, possibly some signal enhancements, but to alleviate that specific kind of interchange area for probably a lot of that car traffic that is at that location. So the final designs, you will not find those in these reports. What you're going to find is the study and the recommendation. What comes next is, with council's approval of each of these reports, we then have an engineer do the actual design, actually doing the engineering drawings that then go through our full review. And then that project comes back through either the council for approval if it's a project that needs to be bid, or in some cases, some of the projects can probably be issued by work order directly by the department to immediately get those in place.
And then finally, as I look at the image right here, Western heading down to that intersection at 44, to Councilwoman Hammond's concerns, and I share them deeply. This is what, when I knocked doors, I heard people say they want more of in the inner city. I can't speak to the other wards outside of that inner core, but they told me time and time again they don't prefer the widening road. They want a road diet. They want that crosswalk, and they want 2 lanes of traffic, and they want those storefronts that are right up against where they have walkable, wide sidewalks. And for one whole week after I attended the Congress for New Urbanism, I didn't drive a car once. I live in Paseo, and I made my way from Boys and Girls Club to Southwest 4th where Anthem Brewery is. And it's hot, but I preferred it. And it's a lot of what I heard in Ward 2. And I think when I hear words like street widening to solve congestion, that flies in the face of what I heard at that conference I attended that said the more we widen and the more lanes we add, all that does is induce more congestion and more traffic. So when we have this discussion about impact fees and the summary of how we got here, I would like for us to address that. Again, I understand there might be other parts of the city where widening streets might make sense. Ward 1. It's not at all what Ward 2 would like. And so I heard you say earlier, bike walk and kind of looking at some of those areas that we've identified as pedestrian areas. Really going to need your help and doing what you were saying, moving away from that widening to walkable streets and walkable sidewalks and bike infrastructure. So I was glad to hear you say that.
And I think you're going to find, I mean, obviously the image on the screen, we have a very diverse city with a lot of different opportunities. You're not going to find necessarily a traffic impact project recommended for a streetscape that was recently completed by Oklahoma City. But again, just a mile and a half north of this location, we have an Interstate 44 interchange that we were just discussing that could use some assistance in making sure to alleviate some of the traffic. And then each ward is very unique. And so, I mean, I will tell you that the reports are tailored specific to those benefit areas and the needs of each. With 750 signalized intersections in Oklahoma City, I mean, there's just a lot of room for improvement in certain areas, especially where the growth and the development are already occurring, not planned to occur, but have occurred and need some traffic relief.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned the diversity, but that's why the areas are split up the way they are. You know, you got the core, you got the infill, you got the new growth, and then you got the rural. And each one of those areas does require different types of traffic, different types of traffic improvements. So, but yeah, so I think that Western is certainly different than, say, Memorial. You know, I mean, they're just 2 completely different streets. But Western becomes more like Memorial when it gets closer to Memorial. So, you know, it's just one of those deals.
Well, and to speak specifically to that intersection at Western and I-44, I was at a community meeting well, it was not a community meeting, it was a refugee resettlement committee that the former principal of Horace Mann Elementary, which is at Western and 50th? Yeah, it's a little bit north of here, of where this picture was taken. But he was talking about kids who were having to walk across over I-44 down Western to get to school. And so I think my concern comes where when we just talk about traffic as getting cars onto a highway faster, over making that whole intersection easier and safer for kids who are, or parents walking their kids to school, so that they don't have to drive half a mile down across Western to get their kids to Horace Mann. And I understand Horace Mann is not going to be an elementary anymore, but I still believe it's going to be used by the public school system. So that's my concern, is when we just talk about traffic as just getting cars to a highway faster or out to Memorial faster, we're really losing, I think, the whole picture of what traffic and relieving congestion can actually look like. So.
And thanks for that. And to the Western Avenue, as you all are looking at that intersection, that's what when I mentioned that I was on my bike for that whole week, this was the barrier, though. Like, my bank is at Mid-First there at Grand, and Trader Joe's, the grocery store I go to, is just a little bit further. This, when you get to 44, it's a barrier. So I would like to see us, as we're doing what we can to ease that flow of traffic onto I-44, think about the pedestrian. I have a friend who lived in Edgemere who worked at Whole Foods, and that interstate crossing was next to impossible for him. And there are a lot of people, not just the kids, who are trying to get across right there. So is that something we're thinking about?
So as a part of traffic impact fees, the answer would be not as likely, but I would go back to the Bike Walk OKC plan, absolutely. So as a part of Bike Walk, we're improving walkability and bikeability. Those would be project concepts. Those would be locations that would be considered as a part of Bike Walk that we would then use whatever city resources were available, whether it be the bond, the Better Street Safer City tax, other potential resources with grants or other things to actually accomplish those types of projects. So traffic impacts fees is just one of the many, many city programs that we have to generate revenue for infrastructure. This just happens to be more for traffic enhancements, whereas the bond and the sales tax and sometimes the grant programs focus more on bike and ped. So it's just a different funding source.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. You're welcome.
We have looked at the consent docket. We have a motion and a second.
Mayor, there is a citizen here on item CR5. Her name's Mary Smith.
Okay, let's hear that citizen if we could. If you would, share your name and address, and then we'll look to
Sure.
hear your
Good morning,
comments.
everyone. I'm Mary Smith. My address is 2251 Northwest 55th Street, James Cooper's ward. Thank you. Hello. So I'm here today. I got in an accident like 2 blocks over from my house on May 14th when an Oklahoma City garbage truck. I was with my 2-year-old daughter. Make a long story short, he backed into my car, and he was at fault, and it did show that on the police report. I'm here today just to say kind of a little bit of a complaint. Again, this happened on May 14th. Today's July 2nd. It's been over 45 days since my car was, I had that collision. So when you are in a wreck with an Oklahoma City garbage truck, you file with a claim within the city, and then you're contacted by one of the lawyers. So I had Kate Goff, and she was nothing but nice, very professional. Went through the claim. They denied a couple things on it, so it was back and forth for just a little bit. But then it came to another lawyer. I spoke with her. I think she's the supervisor, Sherry Katz, and she was nothing but rude on the phone. So I'm just here today. I settled it up on the phone, said fine, I approve it because I didn't want it to go any further. they said, if you don't agree with something, then you're going to get a lawyer. And I was like, I don't want to get a lawyer. I don't want to go any further. So on June 11th, I said over the phone, okay, I accept the terms, and signed a letter that I accepted him. And then a couple hours later, they called me back saying the supervisor, being Sherry Katz, wanted to call and make sure I don't show up at the city council meeting to complain or ask for more, so I'm here to complain. I mean, you know, so I'm able to speak up for myself, and a lot of people aren't, and I just want to see that, you know, maybe other citizens in Oklahoma who this happens to doesn't happen again, because when I got off the phone with her, it just felt like she was almost bullying me into the fact that this was my fault. She said things such as, well, I mean, the police report could have been falsified, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was just sitting here on the other end like, is this really happening? So that's it. I just, you know, was called and told not to show up and complain. So here I am.
Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent docket. Let's cast our votes. And the consent docket passes. Next, we have the concurrence docket.
Can I just stop for a second? Is there anything we can do to address her concern? Can she file a formal complaint? Are there any...
Criminal complaint? No, that's not a crime.
Well, but just with personnel, I don't know what...
No, we'll take care of it.
They'll take care of it.
Okay.
We will investigate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. If that's what was said, it wasn't appropriate. And we'll take care of it.
I'll be happy to speak with her outside. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready for the concurrence docket? Yes. Okay, we're now ready for the concurrence docket.
Move the items subject to individual consideration.
We have a motion and a second. Any individual considerations? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And the concurrence docket passes. Now we're ready for items that need individual attention. First up, in Ward 3, we have a zoning case. Is Lance here? Lance, if you would. Yeah. If you would share your name and address and then present what you would like to do.
Good morning. My name is Lance Wendell. My address is 600 South Washington, and that's down in Ardmore, just a little bit south of here. And this morning I want to thank you for your time and your attention to a potential rezoning here in Oklahoma City. I'm here to request a rezoning from agricultural land to R1 on a tract that is pretty close to the northeast corner of 15th Street and Morgan Road. It's basically due south of the big Terex plant that's right there on I-40. It's a 40-acre tract of land, and it is adjacent to some industrial to the north, a little bit of industrial to the south, and then to the west is another R1 residential home subdivision. Kind of waiting for the map to come up so that I can point it out to you. But so we've been through planning and zoning on this, and in the planning and zoning process. Yes, sir. There we go. Okay, so you know, we have the map, and again, that's right on Southwest 15th Street, a little bit off the corner of South Morgan Road, directly south of the Terex plant, and just east of the Sunnybrook subdivision. It's a 40-acre tract that's currently zoned agriculture, and I'm asking to rezone that to R1, similar to the subdivision to its west. In the planning and zoning process, right, staff looked at it and said R1 is completely in line with the city's comprehensive plan, so what this should be rezoned to. Matter of fact, staff thought that it was such a benign request at the time that they put it on the consent agenda for planning and zoning. But since that time, some local neighbors have come in and they've got some concerns, right? And so I've had 2 public comment sessions with those neighbors to try to understand, what their concerns are, see if we can address them, or at least try to educate them on what I'm trying to do. So I'll share with you kind of what we've discussed. In the southeast corner of the property, there is a small section of floodplain, the 100-year floodplain. And the neighbors, primarily the concerns are from the neighbors of the Sunnybrook subdivision, which is a subdivision to the west. The neighbors are concerned that right now it looks like maybe some of the engineering in their original subdivision wasn't as thorough as maybe it should have been, and they're having some flooding problems. And so they're concerned that construction to their east would exacerbate those problems and cause flooding, back up onto them. And so I talked to them about it. We do have, it's not shown on the map, but Morgan Creek is down in that southeast corner, and so there is a way to drain that field. There we go. You can see the creek down there. There is a way to drain that field, and so I've kind of said, look, it's not the land that I'm purchasing is not the root cause of the drainage problems that you have in your subdivision. But generally, what I've seen is engineering comes in, and if we can widen the drainage that's going through that field, hopefully we can help alleviate the problem. But at worst case, my engineering firm is going to have to do engineering to the piece of property that makes sure that in no way does what I build exacerbate the problem to the west. Right? That's not allowed. And not only does my engineer have to do that, but the city engineer has to review that and make sure that I'm not doing anything that's going to hurt that property. And again, I hope that what I do by opening up that drainage channel is able to get that water out of there faster and helps alleviate some of the flooding problems that they've been having. So they're concerned about flooding, and I've tried to address that and let them know that there's an engineering process and that we'll be able to help alleviate. But at worst case, we will not increase the amount of water that's being held in their subdivision. They're also very concerned about increased traffic in their subdivision, and I also understand that concern. It's kind of hard to see on the map, but there's a sundrop plate or sundrop place that actually dead ends into my 40-acre tract. And so it's kind of been in concrete, if you will, for the past 25 years from the inception of their subdivision that there's a plan for the road to continue on to the east for more residential housing. That's kind of how it was originally planned a long time ago, and you can kind of see how that road dead ends there. But the neighbors are concerned. They're concerned that people will come through their subdivision to get out onto Morgan Road, and that'll increase their traffic. And again, I understand that. And so what I discussed with them was I would advocate, as I go through the planning process, that we don't pass that road on through there. I think I have plenty of access down onto Southwest 15th, which is a pretty big arterial road that I can get the 2 access that I'm required. And that way we're not going to increase their traffic. Some of them were concerned that I would increase the traffic on 15th Street, but again, I think that's a pretty big road that was designed for that kind of traffic and designed for further expansion. It wasn't put in that long ago. So I tried to let them know that I think that there's ways that we can work to prevent and alleviate the traffic congestion, or at least the increased traffic congestion from my construction. They also don't want to lose the big open space. That's a beautiful 40 acres behind their house. Again, I understand that, right? It is pretty. They've talked about wildlife back there and not wanting to lose that. And I've informed them that in the platting process, now the city of Oklahoma City, maybe a little bit different back when they were platted, but requires that I leave some open space, requires that I allow for some common space in some common area. The density that I'm going to propose is not going to be nearly the max density that you can put in an R1, right? We're going to try to keep it where it's nice, and it's, again, common space and open space. So I'm going to try to alleviate that concern. They're concerned about the size of the homes that I'm going to build. I am going to apply, right, and I've been honest with them about it. I'm going to apply for a financing stream from Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency that would allow these homes to be rental for the first 15 years before they would convert to home ownership. But I would be building 1,400 to 1,600 square foot homes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, brick homes. This is a single-family neighborhood. But they were concerned about that. And I tried to let them know that, that's 14 to 1,600 square foot is pretty much in line. There are a few bigger homes up to about 2,000 square foot in the Sunnybrook, but But there are some 1,250 square foot homes in Sunnybrook too. So we're kind of in line at 1,400 to 1,600 square foot with what they have next door. That it's similar. We're a similar neighborhood, right? And I've also addressed that if we do get the financing and I do end up being, rental for the first 15 years, that I will have on-site staff that will work there, right? Leasing staff, maintenance staff that will work hard to make sure that this neighborhood, remains at least to the standard that the Sunnybrook neighborhood is back to the east or to the west. I'm not here to belittle their concerns. They have valid concerns, and I understand that, from the neighbor's perspective. But if we look at what these concerns are, they're concerns that we've kind of heard before, right? It's not uncommon. There's kind of a catchphrase of NIMBY, right? Nobody wants to lose the open space. Nobody wants to lose the wildlife in their backyard. We understand, and I understand that, and I'm empathetic to that. I am. But the reality is, the city of Oklahoma City is desperate for good workforce housing. 2 weeks ago, one of your city planners, Matt Gabrielson, had a consultant come in and ran a planning conference, what Mayor Holt had kind of asked to do to address this problem. He had a conference and to try to resolve it. How do we resolve it? And this zoning and this housing that I'm proposing here today, it goes directly to the root of the problem that the mayor's talked about and that the Planning Commission is trying to address. City of Oklahoma City is booming, and that's a great thing. Economic development is a key to that growth, and your economic developers will tell you that housing is a key to them being able to continue the growth in Oklahoma City. So we're here today, with an opportunity to bring good quality, affordable housing to fill the city's need. And I understand that some residents don't want that next to them. I get it. But the reality is, any place we look in the city of Oklahoma City to try to fill this need, the neighbors next door aren't going to want to lose that field. Anywhere we look to do that. And so I think we're at a decision point that if this is what we want to do and we need to provide this housing, there's always going to be some neighbors that are unhappy about it. It's going to happen, right? But I don't think what we're asking for here today, a rezoning from agricultural to R1, is out of line with the comprehensive plan. Matter of fact, staff has said this is exactly what belongs there. So I'm asking today for a motion and for something pretty simple. I'm asking for a vote to rezone agricultural land to single-family homes, identical to the single-family homes that are next door, identical to the property that has some concerns and complaints. Because if we don't look at rezoning this to R1, then the next developer is going to come in and he's going to talk about multifamily. And I think they're going to be even more concerned about multifamily. Or he's going to come in and talk about commercial or industrial, right? And if we don't rezone it right now to R1, what's the next step? If we leave it as ag, I think that we're then turning our back on the growth of Oklahoma City. So I ask today for your support, and I thank you for your time.
One question
Thank you,
real
Lance.
quick. Just one question. I'm so sorry. You mentioned you had 2 neighborhood meetings.
Yes, sir.
Were the neighbor, and you reached out to the neighbors and tried to meet with them and talk to them.
Yes, sir.
And explain what you were doing. Were the meetings well attended?
The first meeting was not. There were only about 5 folks. The second, and then those folks kind of organized and got some others to come in. The second meeting, there were around 65, and the councilman attended, and so did the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you.
Sir.
I have a question. Just kind of reading some of the, concerns from the community. What do you say to address those concerns, which you kind of mentioned a little bit previously, but for those who are saying rent to own for 15 years, that's their concern, what is your response to that?
Well, my response is not everyone today can afford to buy a nice 1,400 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Mustang Schools. But there are people that want to. They just can't afford, right? And so they're working on that, and they're working on a way to get there, and this is not a long-term rental. To me, this is a rental until it's ownership time, right? And I feel like that there are folks in Oklahoma City that deserve that, right? They're on the right track, but just not everyone gets to be a homeowner today, right? But that doesn't mean that they don't deserve good, decent housing with a yard where their kids can play, right? They don't have to be relegated to apartments. That's not, I don't feel like that's a requirement. And there's about 15% of the Sunnybrook subdivision right now, if you look at the real estate data, is rental. Right? So there's already rental there. There's rental across the street.
May I ask?
Sir.
Yes. you mentioned workforce housing and affordability, and you're out here 15th and wherever the street is.
Morgan.
Portland?
Yes.
Morgan?
Yes.
Do you do similar work within the inner core of the city?
I will tell you, this is my first venture into Oklahoma City. I'm from Ardmore. I'm a rural guy. I have done infill. I have done the same type of financing where we just picked a lot and picked up 45 or 50 lots in urban infill in Ardmore, Oklahoma. I've done it in Durant. I've done it in Chickasha. I think it's great, but I also think kind of big, I think subdivisions are good too. So I'd like to come back. So yes. Yes, but not in Oklahoma City yet.
Two things. I'm always concerned whenever I hear anybody who's against multi-unit rentals, because I know my zoning history and I know the racial discrimination that brought for the better part of the 20th century. However, I'm also concerned because those very same renters are probably going to need access to public transportation and those sidewalks we were talking about earlier. And so whenever I see these sorts of units on the periphery where there aren't necessarily those bus stops waiting for them, I get a little concerned about that. I'm curious.
Sure, and that is a concern. I want people to be very clear, and I think this is something I've tried to educate the Sunnybrook subdivision on. This is not a Section 8 subsidized housing. This is tax-exempt bond financing, and I will tell you that when you look at the incomes for the folks that are going to live here, it ranges from a single person is making like $36,000 a year, right, and can't make less than about $25,000 a year. They can't afford their rent. Up to, a larger family of, 5 or 6 can be up in the mid $50,000 a year. I'm going to tell you that 95% of my tenants have vehicles. That is normal. These guys are making $18, $20 an hour, working at Terex. They're the janitors at the school, right? You even look at an entry-level policeman. If he's got a big family, that's what he's making. So most of them that I see have vehicles.
That they're going to have to maintain.
No, they do. But that's their choice, right? I mean, that's their lifestyle choice. They want to have a car.
Okay, we've had a number of people who have signed up to speak. Are you through your comments for right now, Lance?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you would come forward, try to limit your comments to 3 minutes and not to repeat yourself. First up, Catherine Davidson.
Hello, my name is Catherine Davidson, and I live at 9601 Bluebonnet Place in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I apologize because I'm very nervous. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. I stand before you as a resident of Sunnybrook with 229 other residents, figuratively, standing behind me, as you can note from the petition that I submitted to you. Sunnybrook is a small, quiet neighborhood built over 35 years ago that we are a neighborhood of retirees and young families. The majority of our residents walk the neighborhood, and our children ride their bikes and play basketball in the streets. There are not many neighborhoods such as this in the current modern world. We understand that we are in one of the fastest growing counties in Oklahoma, and what that means change. But due to the fact that Sunnybrook was designed over 35 years ago, we do not have sidewalks in our neighborhoods. Our streets can get crowded with cars parked along the curb, and there are areas in the streets in need of repair. We have several turns and a fork that 160 plus additional cars can become dangerous, confusing as to who has the right-of-way, and congested. By allowing access to use Sunnybrook as a throughway would be detrimental to the safety and character of our neighborhood, because more than 35% of pedestrian fatalities occur on local streets, and we don't want our neighborhood or our children to become a part of that statistic. With the concern for the safety of our neighbors, we also are concerned for the people who might live in the field that Mr. Wendell wants to develop into homes. Those of us who live in this neighborhood know the ins and outs of the area. This field is a flood zone, and if you look at it, look at not just the 100-year flood plan, but the 500-year flood plan, almost the entire field is a flood zone. With the recent rains, we watched our streets turn into rivers with water up to the curbs and then drain into the fields. We then watched this field flood multiple times outside the designated 500-year floodplain, with water coming up into the backyards of the houses along Softwind Avenue. This field doesn't need to be turned into a development. As it stated in the staff report, the aquifer in this area is considered highly vulnerable to depletion. Sunnybooks, T-Rex, and CRST are all designed to drain into this field and then flow into Mustang Creek. Water lying in the floodplain seeps into the aquifers more easily than water in streams or from residential streets. We need this 500-year floodplain to help our aquifer and provide a buffer of space between Mustang Creek and surrounding neighborhoods. By developing this area, you are taking away that buffer and a natural resource to help our aquifers restore itself. We hope that the council's votes show in favor of community to ensure the safety of our neighborhood and that the protection of our natural resources are a priority to them. I hope and pray along with the other residents that the City Council would listen to our request and vote no for the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yes.
William Sharp?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm William Sharp, 1432 Sunnybrook Lane. I live kind of on the west side of our Sunnybrook addition there. I'm 62 years old. I'm a farmer. I've lived in this area my whole life. I still farm the family farm of 110 years at Southwest 29th and County Line Road. I used to farm where you see the southeast corner there where it says AA. It was the old Bohannon place. I used to farm across the creek. I know this land, all this area my whole life. I remember when there was a road through there and an old bridge, where there is now a new road and a new bridge, because many years it was abandoned. My main three reasons for saying this should not be R1 at all, should be some kind of commercial or light industry or thing, is because there's a disposal well where you see oil well. That's not an oil well, that is a disposal well. There's truck traffic that comes in and out of there 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's an ongoing operation. It's an oil industry thing that we have. It's part of the state of Oklahoma. It's what's been going on. There's frac tank business directly there south, right in the middle of where he's wanting to talk about. All this is gravel. It comes up with dust with our predominantly south winds that blows over this area. You can smell 2 days last week. I could smell the oil and the disposal water that was there. Sorry, I'm not a very good public speaker here. I don't think that anybody is going to want to stay in those homes if there's homes built there. I brought this up at the Planning Commission meeting, and nobody present was aware of any of these situations, because I don't think, you can look at it on a map, the map tells you nothing. You've got to live out there. I go up and down that road to my farm several times a day. You see, you know that trucks are coming out by the cloud of dust that's coming up. Terex up there has installed fans this last winter. Apparently they have a paint shop on the south side of their building with big exhaust fans. They are muffled now from what they were over the winter, but you no longer hear the interstate noise. You no longer hear the coyotes down on the creek, which was a common thing. So you're putting these people even closer to Terex. You're close to all this dirt, these smells. Mr. Wendell said he would have some kind of a commission thing done to check the air quality. It's, you know, if you do it on the right wind and everything, it's going to come up fine. The ground to the east was owned by the Swishers, who were CMI, which is now Terex. So I think you're going to wind up with a thumbprint of rental houses inside of a industrial district, because he has the option on the north 20 of this too. So you could wind up with houses stuck into the side of this industrial district with all these noises, smells, whatever. Also the flooding, because I've lived there all my life, when we had cotton over there across the creek, there's twice in the 70s that this area flooded. It's a 100-year floodplain, okay? It stained our cotton red. We weren't able to use it. In '96, the year my mom died, We were trying to help a neighbor lady get home from a hospital. We were trying to get, the whole area was flooding. We had one of those typical training effects that happens in Oklahoma. We went to 29th and Morgan to see if we could get across, because they'd built the new bridge across Morgan Road, nice concrete bridge. Only the top of the bridge rail was sticking out. Mustang Creek was a half-mile wide on Morgan Road between 29th and 15th Street. This area where, and that's 3 times in my lifetime of 60 years that I can tell you that this 100-year floodplain has flooded. So to those of us who have been out there a long time, 100-year things are a joke. They probably need to be like 25 years. A large area, if you had the map that we saw earlier at another meeting of a 500-year floodplain, all of this area is probably what should be the 100-year. So those are my objections. I don't think this needs to be some kind of warehouses or something that could be nice next to us, that we have, not make as much noise or something, but I don't believe this is appropriate for residential for those reasons. And I also don't like it being rental houses with subpar rent, because he has told us that there's going to be like $800 to $900 rentals, whereas most of the area, from my understanding, is $1,100 to $1,200. So you come in with this, and you're going to have all these problems. I don't think he's going to keep these rental houses full, and we're going to have a problem on our hands.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp.
Thank you.
Ms. Williams.
Hi, my name is Irina Williams, and I live right now in a 5808 Northwest 132nd, Northwest Oklahoma City. I am one of those people that will be living right there. So I want you guys to just look at me. I don't drive a very fancy car, but I do have a car that is very well maintained. I have 3 children. I'm a single mom. And I live in an apartment. I've been living in an apartment for the past 4 years. And there is not a chance on earth that I can buy a house. But I do have a job. I make enough. I take care of my kids. I take care of my apartment. It's well maintained. And I disagree that we wouldn't like to live there. I don't think that a commercial unit would be immune to flooding, if that's going to be a problem. I believe that if I rent a house over there, my kids and I, along with a lot of people that can't be up here today to speak for themselves, but they have the same problems that I do. We're just honest people. We're normal. I'm an American citizen. I pay my taxes. I keep my things clean. And we are not subclass people. I think we deserve a place to live. And if Mr. Wendell is here and he can build houses, there are 1,600 square feet, 400 square feet homes for $900. That does not make the low rent. It doesn't mean that the people that are going to move there is going to be awful people, subclass citizens. I don't think that that's right. So I'd like to ask you guys to approve this, because there is not a lot of those areas in town. It's very hard to find good homes, close to good schools. Mustang is a good school. And if we want to live in a good place, we have to be an apartment. An apartment you can buy. So I would absolutely love the chance to live in a place like that. So please take that in consideration. I apologize that they're going to lose the backyard, but people like me need a place to live too. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea? Is there an Andrea? We're having a little trouble deciphering. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I have terrible handwriting. It's Andrea Freimeyer. I'm a resident of Ward 7, 10517 Highview Drive. I'm here to speak today on behalf of the development and on behalf of the board for the Oklahoma Coalition for Affordable Housing. I'm a founding member and a board member. I did email and submit a formal letter in writing, as I know that the board did as well. And I would say that this is something that really fits with the Oklahoma Statewide Housing Needs Assessment that was performed a couple of years ago, where Oklahoma City needs almost 10,000 housing units by 2020, a portion of those for rental and for homeownership. And it really aligns well with what is already in the district. I know that Lance had proposed putting 2 roads going to Southwest 15th, but the city had asked him to connect to Sunnybrook, and I think those are things that we could work out during the planning phase. And in regards to environmental concerns, I will say that I hope to be a part of Lance's development when it comes to fruition, but past history with Lance, we have worked on environmental issues. Phase 1s and Phase 2s are required before any equity money is advanced. It's required by OFA, and it would have to be addressed. We've also addressed 100-year floodplain issues on a development before in Ardmore. So I hear the concerns of the residents. However, before these federal dollars are given and before the equity is given from me, Lance has to jump through a lot of hoops. So we don't want people living in a bad place. We are in these investments for over 15 years. And if Lance does anything wrong, he's gone and I'm in. So, which he would never do. He is really one of the best and most efficient affordable housing developers across the state. What we've been able to do on city infill lots, like you brought up in Ardmore and Chickasha, has really turned around those towns. And I will caution you, our title girl hates those because the getting those titles cleared is really a challenge and a nightmare, but it really does turn around a community. And I don't know, I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I do encourage you to approve this and really think about who would be living in these units. It is not free housing. It is not poor people. It's really everybody, mostly in this room. If you start looking at the area median incomes, it aligns well with the median incomes and the home values that are already in existence in the area. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Jerry Sinnard. This concludes all those people who have signed up, so if you'd like to speak, now's the time to sign up.
Good morning. Morning. My name is Jerry Sinnard. I live at 1412 Softwind Avenue, Oklahoma City. My property for the last 23 years is just over the fence of this planned development. Over the years, the water has backed up into our yard from this development because this 40 acres out here floods regularly. Water has been 13 feet up into my yard. We've had to knock holes in our fence to allow the water to drain back into the field on down into on 15th Street. The issues have been addressed about the traffic and the flooding. From what I understand, the 9th of this month, we received some information from MAPS that they're seeking ideas for additional monies to be spent for areas. The 9th, they're going to be discussing parks from I-44 to Garth Brooks Boulevard, from Highway 66 to Mustang. We have no parks. There are none in the western part of Oklahoma City, none. MAPS 4 could take this 40-acre piece of property and turn it into an amazing park. There's woods up in the north end that you don't show there. There's about probably 3 to 5 acres of woods up in the north end of there that, from what I understand from the city, the requirements that it be left alone because they are large trees. This would be a great nature area. Like I say, we do flood. I just would like for it to be a park. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. I know they said the price of the property is for single-family homes. We've talked about the single-family homes. Everybody knows they're going to be rent-to-own. The people have to stay in them for 15 years before they can own the home. So at $900 a month, they're going to pay $162,000 in rent before they have the ability then to purchase the home. So then they pay an additional approximately $200,000. So this $85,000, $90,000 home is going to wind up costing them about $450,000 after they rent it and then purchase it. We have right down the way, there is a housing development, homes for sale. They got a big sign posted up there, $717 a month. You own the property. So with taxes and insurance, it's going to be around $958. So for the same price that he's going to rent his homes, you can own a home. There's a fellow that's waiting behind us here that's got a big plat for an area that's at Southwest 59th and Sarah, going to be a huge amount of homes in that price range. This could be a great park. So think of it as a park. But I want to say one last thing. I was an abstractor and a title examiner for a number of years. I've gone over the deeds and the trusts of this property. It's a mess. I don't even know how Mr. Wendell could speak today because there's no way that they can allow him to speak because nobody knows who owns the property currently. If you'll go through your packet there from the applicant, even the abstractor for Canadian County says she doesn't know who owns the property. Took it to a trust officer yesterday. They said without all the trusts that in this land, they have no idea who owns this property. So I suggest that a lot of titles be quieted before any decision is made. Let it be a park. The 9th will be back to let it be a park. Thank you very much.
My timekeeper pulled the plug on you up here. Y'all have been very patient in the audience to hear all this. I'd like just to introduce our planning representative on the Planning Commission. Mary Coffey is here. She's worked diligently on this whole process. I have an amendment that I'd like to offer, and I hope you all will accept it on the council. I'd like to move that we take this application back to the Planning Commission with instructions to develop a PUD, a planned unit development. As way of introduction, why that's necessary. Single-family housing zoning cannot have criteria put on it like a PUD can. Many of the items, the very good concerns that the neighbors have, and many of the offers that the developer has made cannot be memorialized unless we have a PUD. So therefore, I move that we move this back to the Planning Commission and instruct them to come up with a PUD. Second. We have a motion to second. Any questions?
We just need 5.
Can I ask the developer to speak to what their thoughts are on that? I'm curious what that might look like for you all, or if I'm sure obviously it's going to take a little longer, but what your thoughts are on that.
My number one thought is that I am very gracious to Councilman McAtee for trying to find a way forward, right? And I do appreciate that. I know that this is a contentious issue. I know that we have folks on both sides with very valid points, and he and I have talked, and it can be argued both ways, and I completely understand that. And if that's the way the council goes, then I obviously would not buck the council and say, I understand. In my heart, I feel like there's some term, those people getting used, that makes me uncomfortable. And it's, hey, we need to put some extra restrictions on this so that we can make sure that what you're building is good enough. And I have some heartache with that. Again, I'm gonna support the council, and if that's what it takes to get there, I appreciate that the council's working with us. But I do have a little bit of heartache with, if we're going to have those kind of people, we need to make sure that you're going to do this and make sure you're going to do that. A lot of times when you have, like they talked about, hey, if I was going to build $300,000 homes, for people that make $150,000 a year, I don't think we'd see those restrictions. So a little bit of heartburn, but I absolutely appreciate what the councilman's doing to making sure we get across the finish line. And that's really where I am. We need to get across the finish line.
So my understanding with the PUD, would the things that would be able to be included in that speak to more like the road, the outlets, the environmental issues? Is that
Yes.
what? Okay. Well, thank you for your...
An effort was offered for fencing. The neighbors wanted fencing, so fencing would be specified in there.
Okay.
There are only certain things that can go into a PUD legally, and they all are, and has nothing to do with your concern, which is a valid concern. But it's just a way to memorialize it so that should something happen to Mr. Wendell, we've got down what it is.
Because I'm just curious whether the things that I think Andrea spoke to about you already have to jump through a fair amount of hoops on some of those issues that, I wasn't sure if that could sort of address those concerns in the long term.
It could, and I don't, the reality is I intend to do those things, and I'll put my name on it. If I tell you I'm going to do this, I'll put my name on it. I don't have a problem with it. It's not that I'm going to have a problem with the things that we've talked about. I think it's a little bit of heartburn about
Everything that he's indicated, okay, I picked up from the meeting and wrote down in the PUD. For example, one of the things he wants to explore is tornado shelters. Okay? He brought that up.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And so there's nothing that's been added there off the wall.
I think the only concern from the current owner's perspective is that if we agree, into that, I'm in the process of purchasing the land. We've now encumbered the land, and these things have to go forward, right? Then if I agree to do tornado shelters, which I'm going to do because Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency is going to require me to, I'm happy to do that. But now I've encumbered the land for the next guy that he's got to put those things in. He can't build less than 1,400 square foot. He's got to be 100% brick. He's got to have fences. I think that's my only concern. But again, I really appreciate the fact that you're finding us a way forward.
I just want to be crystal clear from my perspective.
Sir.
I, too, share concerns whenever I hear people say phrases like, those people, right? I really want to make sure that to the young woman who spoke, who's wanting to raise her kiddos in a good school, I get that. My concerns are very specifically environmental, the preservation of natural woodland grassland, drainage concerns, and it sounds like this PUD will allow you all to address those. So that's the sort of stuff that I am more concerned with than people trying to do right by their kiddos and their families. So I just want to be very, very clear on that. So, thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it passes. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming down. Next up is, which one we got coming up?
The next one
PC 10582. PC 10582.
is in Ward 6.
Ward 6.
Do we need the developer to come, representative, to come speak to this development?
Joe Beth, the ball is all in your court.
Okay.
I've been benched.
When I got here, it was full, and I thought everybody had heard that I was coming back. So I'm disappointed that the audience has shrunk so much. This is a straight zoning case. My
Name and
client,
address.
I'm Pete White, 13733 Southeast 134th. This is just a straight zoning case from R4 to C3. My client is a real estate, commercial leasing, rental, mainly used car lots and commercial business. It's an area where it's totally commercial. No protest that I know of, unless there's someone signed up this morning.
Okay. No one signed up to speak. Okay, with that, I move for approval. Second.
Cast your votes. And it's approved.
Good to see you all.
Nice to see you. PC 10583, Ward 7.
Yes, is the applicant here? Okay. With that, this is an application to zone from a PUD to agricultural, and I don't see any protests for this, so I am going to move for approval.
Second. Motion and a second. Any comments? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, PC 10584, Ward 7 again.
Yes, this application is for final hearing, recommended for approval, and this is for rezoning to allow the to develop a property for auto storage. And there were no protests on this. With that, I move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, Pc10585 Ward 4. Todd.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. This is a Bnsf expansion of a rail yard down on Southeast 89th in a heavy industrial area. So without any questions or comments, I would move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. The next item was an uncontested one. Next, 1724, PUD 1724, 5600 South Sarah Road.
Good morning, Brad Reed with Crafts and Toll, 300 Point Parkway Boulevard. Zach Roach with Ideal Homes is here with me today. We have a PUD for residential subdivision at 59th and Sarah. The main differences for the PUD is there was a small change in the lot size. We went from the 50 by 120s to a 50 by 115. This allowed for this large common area of 4.5 acres to be put in the middle here. The other thing was there was a front setback change to 14 feet for the building, but a 20-foot would still apply for the garage. With this, they added a 65% brick requirement to be put in there. This area was an area that was held for urban reserve in the comprehensive plan. We're going to extend about 1.5 miles of sewer down. We're working with a couple other developers through there. And so this was taken out of the reserve for the urban reserve. And so we ask for your approval on this. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the developer? Seeing none, I move for approval since this is Ward 3. We have a motion to second. Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
And it is approved. Thank you, sir. Next up, SPUD 1120. Ms. Hammond.
Do we have anyone that, if you want to speak to this, just my understanding is that this is really just to get the zoning in conformance with what's already been there for a couple decades.
For a long time, yeah.
Yeah, if you could speak to that.
It was zoned R1. Historically, it was Elizabeth House, Inc., which was a nonprofit. It was kind of a transition house for various people. And then Catholic Charities purchased it in 1992. They had it for many years. Pime LLC, who I represent, purchased it at the beginning of this year. Part of that transaction with Catholic Charities and Pime was we bring it into conformance. It was zoned R1. It's a 2-unit, 4-plex, and so it was strictly just to bring it into conformance.
Did we have any protesters? No. Well, with that, I move for approval.
A motion is second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is approved.
All right, thank you.
Next up, Mr. Stonecipher. SP 524.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an ordinance on final hearing. It's closing a portion of a 30-foot utility easement. It went before the Planning Commission without protest, proved unanimously. I'd move for approval.
Correction, I gave the wrong nomenclature, CE 991.
We're on B.
A on B, yeah. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, SP 524, special permit, Ward 3.
This is the matter. This is Councilman McAtee, Lane Nice, 100 North Broadway for the applicant. This is a mining permit that had been postponed a couple times, and city staff has met with the property owner in this area that had some concerns, but they were not related to this application, and those have all been addressed as I understand it, and so we would ask that this be approved.
Okay, somebody has signed up to speak. Kathy Bogart?
Yes. My name is Kathy Bogart. I live at 15501 South MacArthur.
I am here to protest this permit again. I was here the last 2 times. I believe they were told not to mine till they got their permit. On June the 22nd, I have pictures on my iPad where they were hauling sand out, hauling dirt out. I have pictures of the loader loading it out. The city was going to come out and do a flood drainage study, what was going to be done. Well, the city people, or maybe Cleveland County's the one on the road grader came out. They dug a ditch so it would drain not into our road. And what does the person with that permit, he went ahead and he filled it up with gravel so it couldn't drain that way, so his trucks could go over it. I have a real problem with this permit till everything is done, till the drainage has been addressed out there. The fields to the north of him are still flooded. I did notice that he took a pump one day, tried to pump some of the water out. He did pump some of it, but it's still standing water. And this man's pastor, Mr. Rowland, if Mr. Rowland was alive, he probably would be, he'd be having a fit, because that's farmland. And it is rented out to a person for farm, but it's underwater now. It's still underwater because of the road that he put in there with no drainage. So I'd like for the council to table this till we get a study and get the drainage done out there. So when we do have these floods, that it doesn't drain down the middle of our road.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Council, if I may, the drainage issue was for the property across the street, not my client. Now, there was some dirt moved. My client moved some dirt, which city staff called me and said, hey, they can't move any dirt until they get all their permits, put a stop work on her. They've done that. There was some miscommunication. But that issue has nothing to do with this permit. We have to comply with all the technical evaluations. We'll still, once you approve this today, we don't get our permit where we start mining today. We've got to go through the rest of the process, and this has been deferred. Ms. Bogart, I've talked to her, I've talked to Eric. The issues that she has are with a different property owner. I know she's unhappy that my client did move some dirt. That was miscommunication. I made it clear they can't do anything until they get the proper permits. They have a right to move, once they get the floodplain permits and other things, to move dirt out there. They're not mining sand. They have the right to do other things on their property. And so, but they do have to, because of the areas in the floodplain, they've got to get some permits, and they're going to do that. So they've been out there. In fact, I mean, as she said previously, her family sold this property to my client. The complaints with the road, and I think staff can address that, have to do with the property owner across the street. So I would respectfully request we not defer this any longer, because my client can't move forward to obtain the proper permits until you approve this. So you're just putting them in the deep freeze for an issue that's unrelated to the sand mining permit. So,
JJ, can somebody from the city speak to what we've got here?
Eric Winger, Public Works Director for Oklahoma City. So the application that is before you is for sand mining permit. You'll notice on the drawing that's on screen, it is west of MacArthur, south of 149th. Ms. Bogart lives to the south of the area that is highlighted, and there are some concerns that were brought to the city's attention east of MacArthur, south of 149th, that city staff are continuing to work to address. There is a property owner in that area that has placed some unauthorized fill both in the floodplain and the floodway. Initial concerns were also with the road, and a lot of those concerns followed a lot of the significant rains and things that occurred in June. So the road has been restabilized. The road work is not 100% complete, but the major issues with the road have been repaired with the large holes that were present. The city is working also with a property owner on the flood impact study that was mentioned. But again, that is for the area east of MacArthur. The property owner to the east has also removed some, about 2/3 of the unauthorized fill to date that is in the floodplain and the floodway. But again, that is an ongoing project that the city staff will be continuing to monitor until we get them in compliance. And so as it relates to the application that's before you today for the sand mining permit west of MacArthur, south of 149th, city staff do not have concerns with the application as presented today.
Thank you, sir. Having heard that, I move for approval. Any comments or questions?
I have a concern because I guess my concern is the fact that I understand we have to approve it and still go through the process, but it just seems like there's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to what is just hearing what was just said. There's still a lot of unknowns of what's happening, truly happening in this area. And I would like for us to really consider that as far as let's dig deep into it and understand the concerns that are there when it comes to just the sediment and everything else that has to do with this before we just come back to it and approve it. That's my only concern. And obviously with the young lady coming forward and talking about her concerns, that's quite alarming in some aspects. You know, as a resident, obviously residents understand and know their areas. So that's just my concern.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, I share Nikki's concern too. So what is the timeline from Public Works on addressing these specific concerns would be my question.
So as it relates to the property owner that is east of MacArthur, and this would be no different than any other activity in the city that's brought to the city's attention, you know, we investigate, we follow up with staff going out into the field, taking pictures, starting to do the analysis. And so that work began over a month ago where we in fact did determine that the property owner, again east of MacArthur, was doing some unauthorized activities in the floodplain and the floodway. We've been working with them regularly. One of the questions is there are some berms that were constructed by that property owner on the east side of MacArthur that changed the drainage pattern for the portion that's east, and it caused some of the issues to the road. Those berms abutting MacArthur, 2/3 of them have been removed. And that was something that was directed by the city and Public Works because they weren't authorized. The flood study that the property owner is hoping to complete here in the next several weeks with an engineer is going to show how placement of some of those berms won't impact the drainage pattern. But that's something that's going to take several more weeks, and it's for work that's east of this application site. So there isn't anything regarding this application that this applicant is needing to do to reconcile the concerns and the issues that have been raised east of MacArthur. I mean, we really have a citizen complaint that we're following up on, haven't resolved completely, and this application is separate and independent of that. So we will stay committed from a staff and a Public Works perspective to make sure that the property owner east of MacArthur comes into compliance with all the city ordinances and regulations regarding the drainage ordinance, regarding work in the floodplain, the unauthorized work that possibly occurred in the floodway until that's fully resolved, but that will have no change on the application that's before your consideration.
But again, that work is east of MacArthur.
Yes.
And this particular special permit is west of MacArthur.
Yes.
So it's a separate.
And the immediate road concerns that were brought to our attention several weeks ago, those have been resolved at this time, but there are additional road improvements that are also being planned in addition to what was done to reconcile the immediate, there were huge potholes. They were larger than potholes. That has been reconciled.
Well, I guess that's where my concern is.
Yeah, I have something else. They keep talking about the east side of the road. This picture here is right across from their property. That is a field that has been flooded because of the road that he has built. This is a ditch that the county built after they filled in our holes, correct? They built it so the water could drain. Well, next thing you know, it's full of gravel so they can go in and out. It doesn't drain anything now. It drains back down to the middle of the road when we get any rain whatsoever. It's not that I'm protesting the permit per se. We have enough truck traffic out there as it is. 149th of the last week, we called the police department 3 times because the road is blocked because of big trucks parked along the side of the road, and you cannot get in there. Now, with this opening up, that's going to open up more roads, more trucks coming down. Our road is at 149th is awful. Now, MacArthur, I'll have to agree, they have filled in the holes. It is better than it was. But 149th has still got big potholes. It has frac sand stopped on the sides of the road where the big trucks have stopped. They're not hauling frac sand, but they have the big trucks also that'll be coming in and out on that road. I would just like to see, under their permits, it said in the recommendation to the city, I have a copy of it, it said there would be a flood and drainage done before the permit was issued. Now, with what Mr. Rayner said, I don't see that there's been it said a flood drainage study will be required to establish finished floor evaluations, common lot areas, or private drainage easements. The study must be reviewed and approved by the Public Works Department. I don't know if that's been done or not. I haven't seen anything of it. I pulled this right off of the city council recommendation things on the side for the meeting. So that is my problem. The problem is that it's causing damage. The road that he's built to go in there, it has blocked all the water that used to come down through there, and now it goes down through the road. Till they get some tiles and all of that, I don't think we need that kind of stuff out there right now. I'm just at my wit's end. Like I said, I'm just one person, and I have concerns. Hopefully one day my granddaughter will live out there, but right now it's a mess from one end to the other, and I'm trying to work with the city on getting this done, but it's been like pulling hair, because every time you turn around, somebody else is out there doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And I just think that the city needs to have all of this stuff in hand before a permit is issued for it. I do know he has his Department of Mine permits. You're not supposed to be mining without that, and he was mining with that before he even come to the city. So it's not that they follow rules out there, because nobody does. They do what they want to out there, because we're out of sight, out of mind. And I'm just want the council to realize that we all have to, that's part of the city. I don't get city water. I don't have city sewer. I got a trash can stuck down my throat because you're out in the city. You have to have a trash can. I have a dumpster. When you live on a farm, you have all kinds of trash. A little trash can's not enough. But I got stuck with the dumpster. That's the only thing I get from the city. So, it's not like the city takes care of us out there, because they don't. And I realize that in some of the things I read on his information was, it said city water was available, something else was available. That's bull crap. City water don't even get close to us. We have our own well. I got a deal from the city saying, if you don't pay your trash bill, we're going to turn your water off. My comment was, go ahead, turn my water off, because I don't get water from you. So I just think there's an issue here that the city needs to take a look at before more things are issued in that area. That's
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor now to approve it. Do you have any closing comments, Eric?
Again, the concerns we're going to today would not stop the staff investigation of the concerns that have been shared, and so we're still active to make sure that the property owner that is east of MacArthur is in compliance, and then we will make sure that as plans for the mining are submitted, the reports are submitted upon, if the application is approved, that they're all compliant with city ordinances before they're approved.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve.
Really, the one parcel that I heard that's an action item from you was that what you read, right? And that's what you're saying is happening right now, Eric? That's all. If we said that this is the thing that needs to be done, then I just need to know that that's what we're going to do and what the timeline is for that. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask.
So east of MacArthur, the city staff, as a part of the follow-up to the unauthorized activities, has required a flood study of the property owner east of MacArthur. That's not finished yet.
But that doesn't have anything to do with this application.
West of MacArthur, this application, if approved, will require additional permitting, will require an additional study to be submitted as a part of this application we have not yet even received. But if approved, the applicant will be required to submit all that information, engineering information, for review and approval. So that is subject to the approval today, but has nothing to do with the flood and the other information I mentioned east of MacArthur. They have to still submit all that like any development would following the approval of this permit.
And that's what she read, was that specific requirement?
Yes.
And that's what they would have, that this applicant will have to submit that?
Yes, for review and approval.
Well, there's one more moment that happens. Is that what I'm hearing after?
It's possible there's a number of permits that will have to be issued for this site for it to become a mining site. Okay. I don't know what all of those permits and applications may be until they actually start submitting those plans.
Right, Councilmember, until they approve this permit, we have to do many of these technical things, but they're not going to expend the time and energy to do that until this gets approved. But we still have to jump through some hoops when this is approved. But I want to make it clear, when we left that first meeting, this was deferred, I called the city staff and said, what does my client need to do? And the answer was nothing. It's not you. But the issue is it's east. So, I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with this permit. But until this is approved, once it's approved, I've already talked to the engineer. They will finish up all the requirements and submit those to the city before they can start mining sand.
Can someone just provide us, if we approve this today, an update on this particular, what that requirement was to look at this holistically?
Certainly, yeah. And we'll be in touch with city staff and make sure. I mean, there's a list of things we have to do. Yes.
That would be my commit. I need some updates on this because she's very concerned. I don't live out there. I know how my people are in my part of the ward when they get.
And I understand that, but as I said, the city, when I called city staff, there's nothing. And they, in fact, I waited a week for them to call me. Didn't hear anything, and I called them. I said, "What do you need from us?" Nothing. The issue is not with you, and we're deferring this, and my client can't go forward to do the other technical requirements until this is approved.
Probably the best way I can explain this is it's not a lot different than when we have a subdivision plat and you approve a plat at the council level, but the engineering comes sometimes months and sometimes years later. The plat is that first step and the engineering follows, and then they have to go through the detailed engineering reviews. This permit is just that first step. Then the engineering drawings come in for review and approval before they can actually do physical construction and actually operate. So this is one of several. And I don't know how many different permits and applications and things are going to be required, but we'll go through that with them very carefully.
And maybe keep updated.
Certainly.
And then when we get to this engineering part of it, I believe at least some of the council, not all of us, would like an update on it.
I'll get with the engineer when we leave here today and make sure he keeps everybody in the loop.
And I just think it's all about open lines of communication between all these different parties here. That will probably alleviate a lot of it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, SP 525. Ms. Nikki.
Yes, this is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval for a special permit to construct a telecommunications tower in that area.
Yes. I just needed, excuse me for interrupting, but I just wanted to point out there's a court reporter today. We requested the court reporter because essentially it's required by federal law. It was not requested by Mr. Box. We have to have a record of this based on federal law.
Okay, no problem. What I will do is there anyone to speak on this? Yeah. Okay. While we did have a protest and with the restrictions of the FCC, we have to look at that in a different way. I will ask for approval. However, I do want to make sure that we have our consultant update and review requirements for future applications of cell towers in our city with our end result for regulations to be set with consistency to not allow these special considerations in the future. So with that, I will move for approval.
Can you, I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part, please, on the consultant You
our
wanted the
consultant
consultant
to
to do what?
update and review our requirements that we have for our future applications for cell towers.
Okay.
There's been some changes, and we need our consultant to review, so therefore it won't have to go through us to approve a special permit.
The reason I asked that, I used to be a regional engineering manager in RF, and we've had this discussion before, but it's been quite a while back.
And I'm willing to meet with the staff so we can discuss further, but after our council meeting, when I deferred a couple weeks ago, I spoke with the consultant and asked for the pros and cons of what we were dealing with as far as the cell tower, the special permit, the footage, and the percentage, and therefore, out of that discussion, I would like for us to have our consultant that we have to review and update for future.
Yeah, just to clarify that most of these towers are what they call conditional use permits. They meet all the conditions, then basically Aubrey now, or Bob Teener, approves it. And when they don't meet one of the conditions, that's when it comes to council. So basically, Councilwoman Nice is just asking for the consultant to review our ordinance and see if any of the conditions need to be changed, adjusted.
Again, with that, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, PUD 1710.
That was withdrawn by the applicant.
That was withdrawn. Ms. Nice again, SPUD 1059.
That was deferred to July.
That's deferred. We're making progress here. We have a Ward 6 parking, metered parking.
Yes. So yeah, this is just to remove some metered parking along 4th Street for, I believe, it's already gone, the streetcar's there. So with that, I move for approval.
Any comments or questions? Cast your votes, and it is approved.
Yeah.
Next, another one.
Yes, I have another parking one. So this is to add some angled parking along 8th Street, just west of Walker, and it looks like it's recommended for adoption. So I will move for approval.
A motion is second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes, and it is approved. Next up, we have a reserved parking space.
One more. So yes, this is to specifically reserve one of those parking spaces along that northwest 8th, just west of Walker, for for a handicap spot. So I'll move for approval for that as well.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes, and it is approved. Next up, we have a public hearing.
This item was actually presented by Chris Browning at the last meeting regarding the boat stall fees, and this is just a public hearing for this one.
Just ask if there's anyone.
Yeah, anyone here to speak on this? Seeing them, we don't have to call for a vote. Okay, moving along, we have an ordinance for introduction. You want to handle that one?
Yes. So we've got Steve Kreis here with the Municipal Counselor's Office. He's going to give us an overview on the changes that are being proposed on the vehicle for hire ordinance.
Good morning. What we're doing here is we're changing provisions in the vehicle for hire ordinance to allow low-speed vehicles to operate as vehicles for hire. These are similar to a golf cart, but their top speed is 25 miles per hour. There's a vendor who wants to operate in the Bricktown area and shuttle people back and forth from hotels to venue sites. Currently, our vehicle for hire equipment requirements would have restricted these low-speed vehicles from being able to operate as vehicles for hire. So what we've done is we've allowed low-speed vehicles that meet the federal equipment requirements to satisfy the city's equipment requirements. We've also added a definition for the low-speed vehicle, and we've limited their use to city streets posted no greater than 35 miles per hour.
Questions for Steve? If not, I need a motion and a second to go to the public hearing.
Move the item to public hearing.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is moved to a public hearing. Next up, public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. I need a motion and a second. If any, we have a motion. We hear a second? Second. Any comments or questions? Anybody in the public wishing to be heard? Please cast your votes, and the motion passes. Next, we have a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Anybody in the public wishing to speak? Please cast your votes, and the resolution passes. Next up, we have a public hearing regarding abandoned buildings. We have a motion and a second to move the resolution declaring buildings are abandoned. Any comments or questions from the public?
What happens to them? Do they just get destroyed, or what happens?
Chad Davidson, Code Enforcement. We declare a property unsecured. The city gives the property owner an opportunity to secure that building. And then after it's secured, it'll remain on that abandoned status until the property owner petitions the city to have that removed. Dilapidated building, the city will give 30 days to repair or remove that structure. If they do not, the city will hire a contractor to remove that structure.
We had a motion already, didn't we? Yes. Thank you, sir. All right, moving right along, a joint resolution transferring all net proceeds and all accrued interest generated to date from the sale of the 2019 taxable series general obligation bonds. Craig.
Brian is here with he's our Economic Development Manager, and he'll explain what we're doing with this item.
Yeah, this is a routine thing that we do, and we issue our gold bonds for economic development purposes. When those funds are received, they go into a city fund. And then this is just a resolution authorizing the transfer of those funds to the Economic Development Trust. And there where, as we invest those funds initially, we can accrue the interest, and that will go into that same pot. We can use that for the creation of jobs and for our affordable housing program. This authorizes the transfer of a little over $30 million that were issued earlier this year, and we received them in May. And right now, we have $14 million in our fund, so with the added 30, we'll have a little over $43 million, or $44 million in our fund.
So the Economic Development Trust manages the strategic investment program on behalf of the city, and that's why we make this transfer into the trust.
Thank you, sirs. Do we have a resolution? We need a motion and a second. Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes, and it is so done. Next, we have a request for a salary continuation for Jimmy Barnett.
Move the resolution.
Motion and second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. It is so ordered. Next, another salary continuation for Mark Strunk. We have a motion and second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes, and it passes. Next up, we have a joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority authorizing the firm of Collins, Zorn, and Wagner to represent an employee.
Move the resolution.
A motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is so passed. Next up, what do we need to do? Oh, we need approval to move this item authorizing the municipal council to confess judgment and liability in the case of Catherine Wade to executive session.
No, we don't need executive.
Oh, we don't need executive session.
We've already had
this.
We had one last.
We had one on
Okay,
this.
so we're ready to go.
It's ready to go, yes.
Okay, need a motion and a second.
Second.
Please cast your votes, and it is so done. This one we do need an executive session.
Correct.
Okay? Municipal Council, Sherry Ellis, we need an executive session to move it to the Hill.
Move to enter into executive session.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it is so moved. And similarly, we have another one on the collective bargaining to move to executive session. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Next, we have claims recommended for denial. We have two claims.
There's a motion and
Motion and a second. Any comments from the public or any questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And the claims are denied. Next up, claims recommended for approval. A motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And they are moved for approval. Next, items from council. First up, an item from Mr. Greenwell and Mr. Stonecipher. Mark? David?
This is an item that David and I have worked on, and we've spent some time trying to understand what's in the best interest of the city council. It evolves from the First Christian Church, where the owner of the property did not want to be designated as a landmark. And so we decided to, as a city council, take a look at this. And we looked at making 4.5 acres as a landmark for the First Christian Church. It got deferred for 2 weeks so we could do some more investigation. And then, on its own, the HPC decided that they wanted to designate not only the 4.5 acres, but all 31 acres. As a lawyer, I was very troubled by that, because the additional land didn't have the church, didn't have the other affiliate buildings associated with the church, and the other land was capable of being developed, whether it be residential, commercial, multifamily. And so what was kind of problematic to me was when you have two competing interests looking at the same thing at the same time. And in this case, when I went back, and David and I went back and looked at the ordinance, it was not only were there two branches that could look at this, but three. The Planning Commission could take a look at this too. And so I thought that in certain instances where there are people that landowners that don't want the landmark designation, we should not have two bodies of government looking at the same thing at the same time. And so David crafted the language. He did a much better job than I did. And I want to add something I think that's really important to this, and I'll let David talk a little bit about the language that he drafted. But on Friday, the United States Supreme Court, in a sharply divided decision, it was a 5-4 decision in the case of Rosemary Nick versus the town of Scott, Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court held that property owners can go directly to federal court now without having first to go to state court when state and local actions effectively deprive the landowners of the use of their property. And in this case, if I go back to the example of First Christian, where we were looking at 4.5 acres and the HPC was looking at doing the entire 31 acres, we had conflicting opinions. And I think that's problematic for us. If the church had decided that they wanted to take legal action and say, under the 5th and the 14th Amendment, I'm going to now file a 1983 action, you took my property, it opens us up to tremendous liability. And with this decision by the United States Supreme Court last Friday, I think we'll be seeing more and more of these efforts by landowners who are resistant to state and local actions that deprive the use of the landowner's property, the use of their own property. So I wanted to have, in certain limited instances, where we would exclusively have the city council look at this landmark designation And David came up with some language which is, I want to say this correctly, more than 50%. If a community took the time to look at designating a landmark and they voted by 51%, we would refer that to the HPC and it would take its normal process. But if it was an example like First Christian Church where 0% wanted it, it would exclusively come to the city council to decide. So it would be done on a very, very limited basis. And if I didn't state that correctly, David, please help.
No, I think you addressed it very nicely, Mark. So when the majority of the property owners want historic designation, they can make the request. The HP Commission can make or initiate the process to gain historic standard. Nothing changes. The Planning Commission could also do that, where you have more than 50% of the ownership wanting historic designation. I accept that. I welcome that. I encourage that. If somebody wants as much restrictions as they can get with respect to this, that's their right. If they want to take it so far that they have to come back and get an application to hammer a nail in an interior wall to hang a painting, if that's what they want, let them have that. I'm all for that. But when when the property owners do not want historic designation, then that should only be addressed by the city council, by the members who are voted by the public and are accounted, have a responsibility to be held accountable by the voters. So, and one point that Mark touched on, we have the ability as a government to take property. There's two concepts to that, though. Taking title to property is what we do and what we refer to as eminent domain. But there's another way of taking property, and that's removing the property owner's right to enjoy the property, and that's what that one most recent case talks about. But there are numerous other cases, and Mark touches on two very important concepts. The 5th and 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which each of us took an oath to uphold, provides for property rights, that the person not only has right to title to the property they've acquired, they have right to use and enjoyment of the property without restrictions. Now, the city can make certain types of limitations when it comes into areas such as nuisance, like if they're not maintaining the property, they've allowed weeds to grow up, or when there's a safety concern, like that needs to be fenced off or something to that effect. Outside of those two areas, the law is pretty well defined. We don't have the ability to prevent the property owner from having full access, full enjoyment, the ability to sell the property if they so choose to do so. So those are the points I wanted to bring out. And we'd be happy.
The only thing I'd add to that is I think through the process of what I learned with the First Christian issue, people came to the table, we worked on a solution. If the landmark designation had been made, we wouldn't have another church attempting to do due diligence right now to buy First Christian. And so I think when the landowner, the person that owns the property, that doesn't want the designation and wants to be able to sell their property, I think that's important. And I think all people should have that right under the 4th and 15th Amendment.
Mark, I would like to make one final comment too, because in this era of justice reform and on our judicial committee, we're saying, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense to force people who don't have the funds to pay fines, and then if they can't pay the fines, place them in jail. Well, we were doing the same thing to this church who had declining revenues, and yet we forced them to go out and hire an attorney and go through the process of having that attorney represent them both before our meetings as well as the HP committee. It does not make sense to force people to go out and incur legal expenses, which can be very expensive, to defend their right not to be designated as a historic property. So That's basically it.
Well, I just have a couple of concerns with this, and I think one of the main reasons is because of what happened with the Brockway Center, and as we're talking about even with this First Christian Church, and correct me if I'm wrong, the main reason that the HPC did that was because of the application itself stating that it was all of the property as far as historic recognition. Is that, am I wrong for saying that? I'm not sure who I need to speak with. And this is just for the sake of the conversation as we're having it.
Yes, I'm Katie Friddle. I'm the program planner for historic preservation in the planning department, and the commission chose the boundary that they did to consider for landmark designation because it matched the National Register nomination that had already been done. Yep.
Okay. So I guess my concern comes into play when we're holistically looking at the application of landmark designation. So how are we going to, or how can we better come together for that conversation? Because in all honesty, the HPC was doing as they should have done when it came to deeming that area, because that is technically what the application for historic recognition was already stating.
I think what I'd say to that is that I am concerned, I'm not focused on that. What I'm focused on is 3 different groups having the ability to do something and come up with different results. And I look at it from what happens if there's an adverse ruling that the landowner doesn't like. And then what happens is that the landowner files a lawsuit. And now, based upon the United States Supreme Court speaking last Friday, they can go straight to federal court. They can file a 1983 action and say that they were deprived of the use of their property. All I'm saying is I want consistency in the rulings. I'm not saying who was right or who was wrong there. I really haven't investigated what the HPC's motivations were in doing that. But what I am saying is that if you are putting on evidence, if we are defending a lawsuit, and we are putting on evidence at a trial, and we have to defend, 2 different agencies are doing 2 different things and coming up with 2 different conclusions, that's not good, because it shows that we're trying to take the land on multiple fronts. I'm not asking that in all instances that the HPC be deprived of looking at this. If 51% of the people say, we want it, it goes to HPC. But if 0%, such as First Christian, doesn't want it, and they own the land, there should only be one body deciding that, because we know there's a good likelihood that we could end up in litigation. If we wouldn't have all sat down and talked, and if a buyer would not have come forward, and we would have done a landmark designation, we would have had a lawsuit in the District Court of Oklahoma County with evidence that was going to go against us that 2 different governing bodies were trying to do this landmark designation. And if that isn't a taking, I don't know what is.
I was going to point out that all this ordinance deals with is who can initiate an application to rezone a structure or site as a historic landmark. That's all it does. If at the end of the day the council has to approve the rezoning, if there's not at least 5 members of the council who are interested in doing the rezoning, you're really just making, by having these other bodies implement the application or initiate it, you're just making them spend a lot of money to respond to it. You really should have it's best, this is policy, so it's not law, but in my opinion, policy is the best policy, is to have the governing body who's actually elected by the people making that decision up front.
And I don't disagree with that. You know, I definitely don't disagree with that, but I think we have to look holistically as to why we are here having this conversation. And that is why we are here having this conversation, because of an application that had already been set and set precedents. Now, because that HPC was going by that precedence to fill out the landmark designation, Now, there was obviously a problem and a concern when it came to the First Christian Church in this whole conversation. So that's what I'm saying. We have to still look at it from the beginning to the end of why we're here. And even when we're talking about historic properties and what we're looking at in Oklahoma City, we don't have that many that have been deemed historic landmarks. And there are so many more that need to be done that obviously with this ordinance, I guess it brings forth that other people can do it. But I'm concerned with that because if that's what his HPC is for, to, in most aspects, to bring that to the forefront for us to understand. Because, I mean, me personally, I can go around and look at each building and try to figure out which is the landmark and which is not, and go through that process. But that was just my concern. So it was discussion, and that's what we're doing.
I agree with everything you just said, okay? But I also agree with everything that Kenny just said. And ultimately, if it went to the HPC first, it's going to come to us. What we're trying to avoid is an 8-month delay and the expense of that 8-month delay before we ultimately vote on it. This makes a determination happen quicker and less expensively.
And Amanda wanted to add one comment when you get through. And the HPC can still recommend to us sites that that they think we should initiate.
All the time. Right. And we are the elected officials.
Yeah.
Are you not concerned that the city council as a governing body could still end us up in that same sort of situation? You see, I hear your concern. I'm listening. I'm actually reading right now about the Supreme Court case, and I'm taking all these opinions in. Are you not concerned, you two, that well, I mean, to your idea. I didn't mean that like but I'm just wondering, like, wouldn't it? We could have the same potential as a city council of designating something that somewhere along the way the person says, no, I didn't want that. You took my property, and now we end up in a similar federal instance, right?
But that's the point we're trying to make. If we take that risk, which we knowingly do when the property owner does not want historic designation, if we assume that risk, we have to be responsible for the outcomes of taking on that risk, which could be a district court decision ruling against us. And so, you know, sometimes you have not only costs to reimburse that property owner with, but sometimes there can be additional damages that we have that responsibility for. We take that every time we claim eminent domain on property. And normally, maybe I shouldn't say this, but many times the property owner will contest the amount that we deemed is the value of that property. And we go to, I'm not going to try to explain the full process, but eventually a third party comes in to determine whether or not that was a fair price. Many times they rule in the property owner's favor and not ours.
Do we ever do anything wrong?
I would
say this. I think at the end of the day, we make mistakes. Sometimes we don't do things right. But we are the elected officials that are to be held accountable, number one, to the people that voted for us. And number two, I want to present the best case I can in the courthouse to win. And when you have different governing bodies that are heading in different directions, that looks like a taking to me. And it's more evidence of a taking. And so I'm just trying to avoid liability for this city, especially in light of this new decision from the United States Supreme Court.
A sharply divided decision, and if I may read...
I said it was a sharply divided.
And just to read briefly from this article, Justice Elena Kagan, joined by the court's 3 other liberal justices, dissented in furious tones. Friday's decision, she said, quote, rejects far more than a single decision in 1985, and that's the original case. That decision, Williamson County Regional Planning Commission versus Hamilton Bank of Johnson City, quote, was rooted in an understanding of the Fifth Amendment's takings clause stretching back to the late 1800s, Kagan wrote. On that view, a government could take property so long as it provided a reliable mechanism to pay just compensation, even if payment came after the fact, Kagan said, adding no longer. So there is a concern on our on our country's Supreme Court that this is going to set up a precedent where there's not even going to allow for that just compensation in the event that that was there. So I guess what I'm saying, just real quick, I guess what I'm saying is we have 9 different people on the United States Supreme Court who, in a sharply divided case, interpreted the law differently. And we don't know how that's all going to shake out going forward. This is about interpretation. And we don't know how this shakes out, is what I'm...
And I differ with you a little on that. The case that you're talking about, the Williamson County, was overruled by this decision. It's gone. There is new precedent set by the Pennsylvania case. And what the same article you're reading says, now that you can assert a 1983 Act, and now that you can immediately go to federal court, federal courts are often viewed as friendlier than state courts for such property claims. And what that means is that the landowner can go to federal court and have a better chance in prevailing than in a state court action. And I don't want us being subjected to additional lawsuits where we have 2 governing bodies doing 2 different things. I want one voice to speak, to say to the state court or the federal court, this is what we did and why we did it.
And doesn't HP ultimately, as you and I know very well from our recent First Christian work together, whatever HP's decision is, it comes back to this council. We get the final say on that.
It does. It does. But you already have the evidence of them taking a contrary position. And that's not good in a district court action to have 2 governing bodies taking different
But don't
decisions.
We get the final say here as city council is my...
We ultimately
James,
do.
here's another issue.
That's what we're elected
As soon
to do.
as HP makes that designation, there's a stay on that property. Nothing can be done to that property. And that's a problem, too.
And you're worried that that we'd have to compensate them?
We've never even talked about compensating. And First Christian Church brought it up. It does have a negative impact on the value of the property. Where were we in coming up with monies to present to them for the action that we were taking? Nobody offered any money. Nobody offered to reimburse them for the costs they incurred by going through that. It all started by a former council person stoking of the flames of fear that this was getting ready to be destroyed. That was never their intent. They came out and said that, and I believe them. Nobody was wanting to destroy that. Rather, it was an effort to flex muscle against a church with limited resources.
I mean, I agree with that. At the end of the day, this church, using that example, was down to 40 members. They were trying to sell their property so they could move to a smaller site so the church could thrive and continue and hopefully grow. And by doing what the HP did, you have now an 8-month delay. You have them hiring attorneys, as David said, and they may have to shut the doors. And that would be the travesty, is if the doors were shut, fences were put up around the church, and nobody used it. And we were able to avoid that. And so, in my mind, if we get in a situation like that again, I want us, the elected officials, to be able to decide the issue quickly so we don't harm the property owner.
If I remember correctly, you and I were able to work together, and I would say very well, in fact. But to Councilman Greenwell's point, and again, it was a bit of a blur after the election to taking office when Councilman Shadid proposed what he did. But at the time, what I was hearing from the neighborhoods behind First Christian was that no one knew. You say that they knew that this was going to be protected from demolition. No one knew that it was going to be protected from demolition, and no one knew what was going to go there. And this is before you and I got to work with, this wasn't Crossings. You see what I'm saying? Crossings wasn't in that picture yet. This was a completely different, unknown entity that was wanting to purchase that church. And it created anxiety in Crown Heights. It created anxiety in Ward 2. And it wasn't just Councilman, and I ran against Councilman Shadid, so I'm not defending him.
You're just retelling the same rumors and trying to escalate the fear that the people that were not involved with this were trying to generate.
It's easy to make rumors when there is no communication at all about who is going to buy what.
James, it's none of our business. It's private property.
The private property right, Town Heights, all those people right there, David.
No. It's a zoning issue, possibly, if they ever wanted to change the use of it. And that's when you come in, as well as the Planning Commission, on future uses. But for a private property owner to want to sell their property, again, when we prevent that, we're taking the property. And we're usually taking it without compensating the property owner.
The other thing I'd add to that, Crossings have been looking at that property, is my understanding, for about a year. Crossings never had any intentions of demolishing it. They want another church. They want another branch. And the great thing, I think, that you and I were able to accomplish, we were able to get people in a room, and we went from rumor to facts. And the facts were nobody wanted to demolish it. The facts were Crossings wanted to buy it. The facts were that Crossings wants to open another branch to have the church live. And the facts are a contract has been signed, and now we're in the due diligence phase. So once we got to the facts, we were able to get people in a room and come up with a deal that was good for everyone. It was good for our community, good for the churches, and good for the neighborhood.
You and I were able to do that, so too was Crossing and First Christian, and I am honored to have been a part of that. What I'm saying is there was an organization, someone, we don't know who, just before Crossings, that was in that negotiation with First Christian, and that's what's, we can say it was Councilman Shadid that stoked those concerns. I am telling you, not everyone in Crown Heights listens to Councilman Shadid. They heard in the news that someone unknown to them was going to purchase that, and they didn't know what was going to happen there. And that was way before Crossings entered the picture. It was way before you and I entered the picture. We did the right thing. Crossings and First Christian did the right thing. I am saying that in that initial moment, there was legitimate concern way before there was Crossings and you and I. And
James,
I would have liked to have seen.
Caution you on your language. That never made any news story that I knew of.
Steve Lackmeyer contacted me, and I will actually. Yeah, well, I mean, you said news. I'm not making this up. Steve Lackmeyer I wasn't even on council yet, friends. Steve Lackmeyer reached out to me right after I won. I was standing over here on Main Street at Clarity, and he asked me, James, what is your opinion on First Christian?
Okay, that's a private discussion. It wasn't being reported as news.
That was being reported. I don't understand. I'm sorry, David.
The fact that
Excuse me for just a minute. Let me interject here and take a little break. We have two citizens who have asked to be heard on this matter. Would it be okay if we just put them up and maybe they've got some light to shed, and then we'll go back into this good dialogue?
Yes.
So, Kayla Lewis.
Kayla Lewis, 200 Northwest 22nd Street. I am speaking on behalf of Preservation Oklahoma, the state's only nonprofit with the mission of preserving the places where Oklahoma history lives. We've already sent in a letter when this was originally introduced, and I'll just kind of say a few reasons why we are in disagreement with this agenda item. As Councilwoman Nice said earlier, we don't have that many historic structures, and this would likely result in fewer historic structures. And arguments we've had at previous council meetings is that our number is very low compared to other cities, comparable cities across the United States. And this is a tool that actually adds protection and review to historic structures across our state, across our city, versus just being on the National Register, which is more of an honor system. I would say also that
you guys do a lot. Way to go. Thank you for all that you do as City Council, but this is why commissions like the Historic Preservation Commission exist and Planning Commission. They are knowledgeable and skilled professionals in their field, and that's why they are appointed to be on these commissions. Already in today's meeting, items have been deferred to different commissions, such as the Planning Commission, because they are the most adept to handle these conversations. I would also be curious about knowing that the HP Commission, that's what they do. They're preservationists on the commission, what the training might be for city councilors for this, if taken away additional review from these commissions. I also will say that the HP Commission aids in the process and helps with the due diligence, which you had talked about before, for the property owner, helps with the actual process. And before this conversation, we mentioned that we believe that this action is likely because of what happened with First Christian Church, and it's clear from today's meeting that this is because of First Christian Church, which seems a little bit like an anomaly, maybe taking drastic measures on a situation versus a process that has worked for decades. So kind of why make this adjustment now? Why take away the power and the knowledge from the Historic Preservation Commission now for this particular situation? And kind of closing, this action also eliminates an important tool for public dialogue for buildings and structures unique to Oklahoma City, which we are losing every day, as we've seen in this city council and all throughout Oklahoma City. In the news recently, we've seen a lot of issues with that. And again, discussion and awareness is critical for the preserving of these properties. That's what Preservation Oklahoma is about, and that's what the HP Commission is the most qualified to have these discussions as well. So we urge the Oklahoma City City Council to work with the preservation community, to work with the Historic Preservation Commission to address concerns about the process rather than eliminating this important tool altogether.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Isn't it true that if there is dual deliberation, there's two governing bodies deliberating, that sends a conflicting statement to the state court? You'd have to agree with that.
I guess I would say if City Council doesn't take the suggestions and the recommendations from the Historic Preservation Commission, who are qualified individuals to make recommendations, then that does send a conflicting, because you are not.
Exactly.
But that means that the City Council doesn't trust the City Council doesn't trust the knowledgeable professionals that are in these positions as well. Which seems unfortunate, not to a good point for you. But
I agree with you. They are knowledgeable. And would you agree with me that still, the City Council still has the ability to refer those things to the HPC, just as we referred things to the Planning Commission, right?
Right, and they also should still have the ability to initiate and instigate this process because they are qualified and skilled individuals.
But I think as elected officials, we should make the decision in certain circumstances.
And you have that power to make the final decision.
And what is not.
You have that power right now. You're taking away the ability for the HP Commission to also initiate these historic properties.
I agree with you in certain instances, so we don't give conflicting signs to the district court when we are sued for inverse condemnation or a taking under the 14th and 15th Amendment.
Ma'am, I've got a question.
Kayla?
Yes?
Kayla, do you have a...
Yes.
Okay, let's take one question and we'll move.
Yeah. So you indicate that you think this will reduce the number of HP applications. How many times has the HP initiated historic designation against the will of the property owner?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, why would you say that comment then? This is only going to change when they don't have a majority of the property owners requesting historic preservation. That's the only time it'll come before the City Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Melissa Hunt.
Melissa Hunt, the Executive Director for the American Institute of Architects, 1300 North Chartel Avenue. My question is, I understand Councilman Stonecipher's concern about the differing opinions, but let's use Planning Commission as an example. When a person initiates a change, an ordinance change, or a zoning change at Planning Commission, Sometimes Planning Commission recommends approval. I assume there's times when this body denies that approval, and for whatever reason, they may take it to court. Again, there's differing decisions. This is the same thing. The City Council ultimately has the decision to make that change or to make the decision, and so therefore, I just don't understand the need for that ordinance. The HP Commission can make the recommendation, and City Council has the ultimate decision, and so I really just don't understand the need for the change, and we oppose the change. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we have more discussion, or are we ready for action?
Just real quick, yes. I want to be very, very clear to Councilman Greenwell's earlier concerns about the initial conversations about First Christian. Yes, Steve Lackmeyer reached out to me. I was not even on council yet, and he had concerns about who the prospective buyer for First Christian was and what that meant in terms of demolition. That was a news story that I had to then respond to, not even sitting on city council yet, in a meeting with Crown Heights neighborhood. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, that was a news story they heard, and then I had to respond to it. And then, thankfully, Crossing steps in, and then Mark Stonecipher and I were able to do some really, I think, great work to preserve the buildings there at First Christian. Just wanted to make sure for the record.
And I think we had a citizen that wanted to speak. I don't know if we offered that opportunity. She stood up. I don't know if we still offer her.
Nobody has signed up to speak at this point.
With that being said, I would move the ordinance, which will be referred, and the ordinance specifically is 7250.2 amended. The amendment was passed out to you today. It's in front of you here. And so I'm moving for the approval of this ordinance amendment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Seeing none, cast your votes, please.
Excuse me. Yes. You have to amend first, correct? You'd have to move the amendment, and since you already took a vote, you have to move to rescind the vote by which it was approved.
I move to rescind the vote we just took.
Second.
Okay.
Rescind.
We're rescinding.
Yes.
All right.
And the rescinding passes.
I move to approve the amendment that was passed out today and is before us at this time on this piece of paper.
Right.
Okay, this is the motion to approve.
The amendment.
I mean, to amend.
Yeah, and then I'll move the ordinance. I have one more vote.
Okay. Please cast your votes.
Now I would move to approve the amended ordinance.
A motion and a second to approve the ordinance. And it passes. Okay?
And it's actually referred to the planning commission.
All right, next up we have resolution approving city travel. You can speak or we can take a motion, whichever.
I motion to approve this item.
A motion to approve? Second. I visited with, earlier about a concern that I had with Joe Beth. The reading of the material for this seminar seems very good as far as instructional material is concerned. In some people's eyes, it might be construed as being more political than instructional. And my concern was that we don't lose sight as we move forward in the apolitical nature that has made this council such a good functioning unit over the years, at least since I've been here, and I had nothing to do with it. I just inherited it. So I just point that out as a potential thing to look out for as we determine these things. Our country, unfortunately, right now is fractured on its political scheme of things, and that slows our ability of our governments to act and we don't have that going on here, and I hope we don't. With that being said, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your...
Let's discuss that.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. So the conference in question, I guess I would be curious to understand what about the conference you feel is, I guess, partisan or I guess, controversial in some way, that doesn't speak to city issues that concern the people that live in Oklahoma City.
I'm not sure I brought my... Let me find my card, and we'll take other comments, and then I'll answer. Good question.
Sure. Well, I guess the concern is, I guess forward thinking is a concern when you have and attend something that just has the title of local progress. And we're looking at it's the Center for Popular Democracy and the concerns, obviously, that are within the conversation. And I did hear you say you were not opposed to the subject matter, and I don't think that's the concern. But I want to say this has nothing to do with politics or being political, going to any conference to experience educational pieces, but this is about equity and understanding how we can use different areas of concentration when it comes to the subject matter to bring to our own communities, and with respect to forward thinking of how we as a city in Oklahoma City can use methods that can be borrowed from other major cities or even smaller cities for that aspect, because I know one of the subject matters for certain is food injustice, and that's something right now that we're talking about as a city council that we're addressing in Ward 7. So I guess forward thinking would be the concern when it comes to what we're looking at going to a local progress convention.
As I read the only thing that I got off the internet, there were a couple of words that just gave me a little bit of, hey, what is going on? Is this something or not? And by the fact that I voted for it, I think you should see that I came away with a conclusion or not. But here's, our members are committed to reclaiming the power. I don't see us in our group here trying to, quote, reclaim power. That just set off a little flag in my mind, okay?
It's actually
a shared vision of shared economic prosperity, okay? That could be taken two ways, shared economic prosperity. It could have a political connotation, or it could have an educational component. And all I was saying in my comments were, let's keep it on education, I hope, focused, and not on power moves or taking over this or that in that kind of a vein. That's I don't know if that, you don't agree, that's fine, but that was just a warning in my mind. And I went through a similar thing like this a couple of weeks ago. There was a seminar up in Colorado for conservative leaders, and I figure myself as a conservative. I did not purposely ask for the city of Oklahoma City to spend any money or any time in allowing me to go, because it could have a political overtone to it. And so that was just on my mind when I was going through my analysis last night. So with that, next up we have what, Ms.?
We need to vote.
Let's vote to you.
I'm sorry, just real quick.
Approves.
I'm sorry. Larry, when you go to your neighborhood association meetings and you meet with your constituents and you hear their voices, you're empowering them. And I think that's what that conference is going to be helping them with. You see what I mean? That's what that means. How do you empower people to use their voices at a nonpartisan city government? That's how I heard it. Thanks. I didn't know what the conference was until you were just describing that, so thanks for adding.
And to ease you, I'll bring a full report back so you'll understand how this was not political and how this was an educational piece, not just for us, but for us to empower our communities to understand the different aspects of what's happening, not just in Oklahoma City, but across this country.
I don't know if you noticed it, James, but you didn't vote if you wanted to vote on that.
He's recorded as voting yes.
Okay, what do we have next on our agenda?
We can go around the horseshoes, see if they have any comments.
Comments from
Council? Or comments from yes. I want to thank Lyric Theater for inviting me to attend Singing in the Rain. If you have, I think there might be a couple shows left. If you haven't had a chance yet, go. They make it rain on stage. Literally, it's impressive. It is super impressive. And I found myself, and I sent this email to Jim Reynolds with Lyric, I found myself just swept up in this idea of the importance of art to a Renaissance story too. Maybe it was because I was watching this downtown at the Civic Center. Maybe it's because the words Criterion appeared on their stage, and I started thinking of our old Criterion Theater that unfortunately demolished long before I, as a film studies professor, ever had a chance to watch a movie there. And Singing in the Rain, as you know, is about that transition from silent cinema to the talkies, right, to sound cinema. And Criterion Theater, which would have been in the heart of downtown, I've learned, once upon a time would have been where we would have watched silent films and where there would have been an orchestra pit down at the bottom where there would have been music playing. And it's just wonderful to me that we would have had that here and that present-day art could recall something like that for our city. So I really want to thank Lyric and the cast and the production crew for bringing that to life here. I want to thank Oklahoma City Pride for hosting the largest Pride we have ever had, 100 to 120,000 attendees. I want to thank Councilwoman Nice, Councilwoman Hammond, Mayor Holt, the Thunder, everyone who was there that day. You don't know the spark you have put in a child's eye who might be hearing some very horrible, nasty language on the school playground or in their neighborhoods. You don't know what life you've just saved by walking in that parade with us. So really, I am not being over dramatic. I am telling you, the suicide rates are high because of the way too many in our society treat lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, especially of color. And so to see 100 to 120,000 fellow Oklahomans out there saying, "We love you," I love you back.
I just wanted to say thanks to the Boys and Girls Club. I had the opportunity to go spend some time down at their Capitol Hill facility this past week. And speaking of art, I saw some great artwork with some octopus hand puppets or shark hand puppets, and it looked great. But they're doing some fantastic work down there in Capitol Hill. Thanks.
I have a few things. I know one is we have a citation from the mayor's office for our Bricktown Canal. And officially today, they are 20 years young. As of July 2nd, 1999, and they've had over 40,000 visitors within the first 6 hours that they were in operation. So our mayor has commended Bricktown Business District and Downtown OKC for their work maintaining the Bricktown Canal as a world-class attraction in our city and encouraging all of our citizens to celebrate the remarkable renaissance of Bricktown and of our city thanks to the investments of MAPS. So this is what a MAPS project looks like, and I myself was able to attend this past Saturday to party like it's 1999. To celebrate their 20th anniversary, and I must say the lines were wrapped around the canal for people to get on the water taxi, and that was at 9 o'clock in the evening, and they were operating until midnight, and that was just my first time. As long as I've been here and it's been here 20 years, that was my first time on a water taxi, and I must say that was one of the best experiences I have had to understand downtown, Bricktown, Oklahoma City, even as we're talking about the monuments that we are placing down in that area, to see them physically up front through that water taxi experience. It was unbelievable, and our water taxi guide, Connor, was the best. And they tell a really great story of maps, how it evolved, just that downtown area, the attractions, and just the history. And I think that's something that we should praise when it comes to folks that are meeting tourists or meeting people that come into our city, and we're able to tell a great story of how that part of our city developed. And each one of the water taxi guides, that's a story that they tell. So they tell that story numerous times every single day, and we get to continuously celebrate in that victory of what has come from 1993, and especially what has come from 1999 in celebrating the Bricktown Canal and a water taxi. With that, don't forget downtown OKC on the 4th. It's going to be a very safe and fun environment, and I know the Dodgers have a couple of games down there for the weekend. And myself, Councilman Cooper, and Councilwoman Hammond got to visit the Pivot, a turning point for youth yesterday, and what a great organization, nonprofit, in the work that they're doing, and even some of the things that we approved in our agenda today for what they're doing as far as serving our teenagers that are living or experiencing homelessness. And we're able to meet that need, and we serve Oklahoma County, and it sits within Ward 7. And the fact that they're building tiny homes to make sure that the least of our young people are served and taken care of, it means so much. So I appreciate what we're doing as far as our partnership with Oklahoma County and also with Pivot. And the Oklahoma Federation of Colored Women's Clubs, they celebrated 109 years. So next year is 110, and I was able to, they asked me to come and be their keynote speaker in celebration of their 109th year in our city. And again, they came into being a little before statehood, but as far as Oklahoma Federation being formed in 1920. Gem and Hoops Fest is going to be every Thursday except for this Thursday, so if you have time, we want to see you. It's with the FACT program. It's on Thursdays, and it's at the Northeast Center. And also want to thank the OCAN. They brought 23 bright young faces to City Hall to learn about city government. And all of those questions were related to lights, but I tried to answer them as much as I could. But I was able to tell them what it's like to be on city council, and we had each young person come and sit in every single seat to understand what it looks like as far as leadership. And I gave them all, I told them, you're Ward 1, you're Ward 2, you're the municipal councilor, you're the city attorney, you know, those things. So they understood their role and the importance of them in that seat. So that was really awesome. And I just want to recognize a centenarian that we have, and she is going to be 105 on this Friday. And her name is Jessie Jordan. She's also known as Mama J. And she was born in Oklahoma City on July 5th of 1914. And she graduated from Douglas High School in 1932, and she attended with her big buddy, the late Ralph Ellison. And she attributes her longevity to not worry, being generous, and helping others. So she does have one daughter, and she has 5 grandchildren. She has many great-grandchildren and 7 great-great-grandchildren. And there's going to be a birthday party for her this Friday, and I would love to see all of those that can come and help celebrate life. 105 years old in Oklahoma City. So that's going to be 6:30 to 8, 3117 North Kelly Avenue. And if you are unable, I'll give you the P.O. Box, 60562. You can send some birthday cards there. I'm sure she would love some correspondence. But again, I think it's important for us as a city to also recognize those who have made it thus far within our city. So with that, I'll close and say thank you.
Just briefly, Your Honor, I wanted to report back on our new amnesty program that was adopted by the Judiciary Committee and then also by the City Council. Yesterday was our first day. And this is kind of a PSA. I want everyone to know that we have 116,000 warrants out there, and we're trying to rid the system of those warrants and get revenue into our coffers. And if yesterday was any indication of the future, this is going to be a really good program. We received a lot of calls inquiring about coming down, number one. Number two, by earlier than 3 p.m. In the afternoon, we had already had 10 cases paying in $1,500. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but think about this. If you have $1,500 come in every day, and we're open for business 22 days out of the month, and you multiply that by 9 months, which is the amnesty program, we'll bring in $300,000. We double that, $600,000. And so this is a program, I think, that's going to work. We just need to keep getting the message out. If yesterday was any indication, we had a good day. I hope it gets better and better and better. With that, one other thing I'd like to ask, with Mayor Holt being out of town or out of the state, are you officially the mayor or vice mayor today? All right. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Next step.
City manager reports. And so we've got a presentation from Kathy O'Connor with the Alliance for Economic Development on some proposed changes that will be coming forward on Tax Increment District 9.
Good morning. It's still morning. I'm Kathy O'Connor. I'm the president of the Alliance for Economic Development. And we have a presentation this morning that outlines some changes that we will be taking through the approval process for amendments to the Northeast Renaissance TIF district. This is TIF number 9. It was approved several years ago. And like I said, we're just at the beginning of the process. This is really just to inform you of what we're thinking about doing. It still has several months of process to go through. So to get started, TIF number 9 was adopted in 2015. It will expire in 2041, the traditional 25-year time period for a tax increment financing district. It primarily covers the commercial corridors in Northeast Oklahoma City. It's focused along Northeast 23rd Street, Kelly, Martin Luther King Boulevard, and over to I-35. The increment was designed to come from both ad valorem taxes or property taxes and from sales taxes. So the budget, the total budget for the TIF district is around $62 million over the entire 25-year period. So in a TIF district, we have two different types of areas that the project plan designates. The first one is the project area, or the area where we can spend money, and this is a map of those areas. It really is a map of the Northeast Renaissance and the JFK urban renewal areas combined together. This is the increment area. This is where the tax revenues are generated to support the project costs that would help to support development in this area. And then this is a map of both of those combined. So several months ago, we had an approval of an item to allocate TIF funding to a project that came to City Council. And several of you had concerns because it was a project that was located at Northeast 23rd and Coltrane, and that are we encouraging sprawl, are we encouraging expenditures way far outside the traditional core of Northeast Oklahoma City. So some of the changes that we're proposing today are to address that concern, and others are to provide an ability to fund projects that are more within the core but were left out of the increment area. So just as a brief overview, the plan objectives were to assist with the implementation of the JFK Urban Renewal Plan and the Northeast Renaissance Urban Renewal Plan. Obviously, it was to revitalize the area, promote economic development, create and retain new jobs, stimulate new investment, both public and private, in the area. And the project plan does provide funding for the other taxing jurisdictions within the to undertake projects in their areas. So the objectives of these changes are to establish a separate increment area east of Bryant Avenue for future projects to address that concern about encouraging sprawl, and then to establish additional increment areas to support development that are these are more located within the core. This is a map of what our proposed changes are. As you can see, what we're going to designate most of the existing increment area as increment A, and it includes the project that you already approved at 23rd 23rd and Coltrane. It carves out a new increment area C that would have a separate 25-year time horizon. So the increment on that area would not start until the city council approves a resolution doing so. And you have up to 10 years from the initial adoption date of the TIF district, so 10 years from 2015, to approve the beginning of the increment accumulation for Area C. Now, if we never have any more projects in that area, we won't start that clock. So it really gives us a lot of flexibility as far as timing of projects and the generation of increment. The other areas are shown as in red, and these are several new areas, and we'll walk through those one by one. So the first one is Creston Hill School. This is an old Oklahoma City public school that's located in a city park. The school district has actually given this school back to Oklahoma City, so you all now own it. We're in the process of working through some title issues to see if you can transfer it to the Urban Renewal Authority. We would then undertake a process to redevelop the school into some other use. So the school was built in the 1920s, and it's in need of rehabilitation so that it doesn't have a negative impact on this neighborhood the way that it is right now. The next one is Marcus Garvey School. Again, this is a former Oklahoma City public school. It has already been transferred to the Urban Renewal Authority, and we have a redeveloper who has a signed redevelopment agreement to renovate this school into senior housing and to build some new senior housing units that are designed for grand families or families raising their grandchildren. The next area is at 30th and Kelly. This area is just a vacant piece of property. And Councilwoman Nice, I think we had talked about taking this one out. So we're going to take this one out. I'm sorry about that. That didn't get communicated to the person updating the PowerPoint. The next area is a piece of property, vacant property, that's owned by the state of Oklahoma at 36th and Lincoln. This one's very close to the existing TIF boundary, and we see it as a great location for some future commercial development in the area. The next piece of property is a sliver, again, immediately adjacent to the current TIF boundary that would be for some commercial development near a Oklahoma City Housing Authority project where they are redoing all of the units in this location, building some mixed income development, so it would support some commercial development to go along with that additional residential development. And then this area is near I-235 and Northeast 23rd Street. It is the area of the former armory. There's an ODOT parcel on the south side of the street. All of these properties are currently owned by the state of Oklahoma, but there is a developer who's interested in redeveloping this property into a boutique hotel, office, residential, several different uses. And then there's also some properties on the north side of 23rd Street that we believe have the potential for redevelopment as we move forward with other projects in the area. So again, what these changes will do will establish a separate increment area east of Bryant Avenue for future projects and add additional areas to support the revitalization of Northeast Oklahoma City. The plan will retain and create new jobs by stimulating new investment in Oklahoma City, and we hope that it will preserve and enhance the tax base by providing development opportunities for other taxing jurisdictions in the increment. So again, like I said, this is just really an informational presentation to let you know that we are beginning the process. The next steps in the process will be that these changes will have to be presented to the TIF Review Committee. They will make recommendations back to City Council. But before that, it also has to go to the Planning Commission for its, where they will make a recommendation about whether or not the changes conform with the Oklahoma City Comprehensive Plan. And then it goes back to City Council. And I believe you will have 3 opportunities to see these changes when they come back to you. So that process will take, as I said, several months to get through. We just wanted to let you know what we were what we were doing and see if you had any questions or comments.
I just wanted to make mention, and maybe you can correct me or help me if I'm mistaken. When we're looking at this, obviously we voted on it in 2015. How many projects do we already have under the belt for TIF? 9.
We have approved 3 projects, one for the Northeast Shopping Center, one for the revitalization at 1700 Northeast 23rd or 23rd and Rhode Island, where Centennial Health has their new clinic, and then there's a retail and restaurant development that's a part of that, and then finally the project at 23rd and Coltrane. And we're working to finalize the redevelopment agreement with that property owner right now.
And I guess with that being said, we're looking at obviously 4 years in, and we only have 3 projects. So we have a lot of work to do when it comes to revitalizing our area of Northeast Oklahoma City and being able to grab that increment to use it for those project areas, which is obviously what we want when it comes to retaining the jobs and obviously creating more job opportunities within the Northeast Quadrant. And obviously the purpose of this is for new investment, and we want continuous investment back into the community. So with that, I know we've had plenty of conversations about what TIF is for the community. If we have to continue to engage, we will, as far as educating our community of how we can be a part of TIF 9 and the investment opportunities available. And we have a future conversation about opportunity zones, which could possibly be able to help and assist with that as well.
Yeah, and the Opportunity Zone program fits really well with local incentive programs like tax increment financing, and it also pairs well with new markets tax credits and historic tax credits and some of the other programs that are available. So the importance is to be able to layer some of those different kinds of programs to make projects happen in areas, and we've had a lot of experience with that through the years. The Skirvin Hotel, even though it's been over 10 years now, was probably one of our first, and those kinds of incentives are what made that project possible.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, next up,
The only other thing we
development
have,
impact fee.
yeah, the only other thing we have on city manager reports here, besides the claims and payroll, is the development impact fee adjustment. And this is just one that it's a report item that comes back to the council. There's no action that's required on it. Within the impact fee ordinance, it has an automatic escalator that's based upon the construction cost index. And this is just to inform and provide the information. It was about a 1.8% increase based upon the calculation for this past year.
Okay, next up, citizens to be heard. Mr. Kirk.
My name is Ronnie Kirk from 2328 North Missouri, from Ward 7. 2 weeks ago, June the 18th, I was here at the City Council speaking to how we're going to break the cycle of our kids going in and out of the court system, the jails, and the penitentiaries. Also Sunday, I had the honor of hearing former Senator Angela Munson sing. It was music to my ears when she came to me and said, "Thanks for doing what I'm doing for our community." Pastor Tony Wise, I called him and asked him to look at the City Council for June the 18th. Look at that meeting. That was on a Saturday. He called me about 5 o'clock that afternoon. Said, "Mr. Kirk, come on into my church. Voice of Praise Church. Voice of Praise Baptist Church." I spoke to his congregation. I told them things that I'd proposed to the city. The kids, 13 under, that I've been feeding for years, in 18 months, they'll be the ages where they can get after-school jobs. After-school job. Embark reached out to me. I was here Tuesday. They reached out to me Wednesday at 11 o'clock, and they said, what can we do to help you for the coming event for July the 7th? I said, I want the parents to be responsible for July the 7th, but I want y'all to help me for what I'm proposing today. In 18 months, MAP 4 will be completed. I'd like for the city to give these jobs to the kids that 14, 15 years old, where they get work permits to work after school, during the school, because they get credits for it. And then I want MBOT to help me by giving these kids that good, decent grades, not A's and B's. I didn't finish the 7th grade. I quit school before I even started the 7th grade. But to see where I'm standing today. So that's why I'm just not just speaking for the kids on the northeast side of town. That's going to be 13 and 14 years old. I'm speaking for the white kids, going to be 13 and 14 years old. I'm speaking for the Mexican kids, they're going to be the same ages. They don't want their kids doing what we had to do to make it. You have to sell drugs, wrong with the wrong crowd. We're sitting down listening to older people talk. We're trying to do what they're going to do. If you give them jobs, they don't have to steal from their neighbors to make it. They don't have to steal breaking people's houses because they'll have jobs to go to. As they get older, they can come down and get better jobs from the city. But I'd like for y'all to reach out to these kids and give them some house of school jobs when they become old enough to go to get their school permit, work permit. So they won't have to steal and rob and take from the neighbors and take from the people that they live with in order to survive. If they have to do what we're doing without trying to help them, that's all they got to do to live. They're going to try to feed their kids. They're going to try to help take care of their parents. They're going to try to get them some nice little shoes. But they ain't got no job, they're going to get it. They're going to get all these guns and stuff. They don't need it. All you got to do is help them. Give them after school jobs. Let them come down and make some money. All the development going on. And so that's how we're going to break this cycle. Pastor Wise, they were so grateful that I spoke to the congregation. They said, let me tell them the same thing I'm telling y'all today. They don't have to steal no more. We can break the cycle together. These kids, if they ain't got nothing to do, all they're going to do is rob and steal and take stuff to survive, because that's what they're saying us do as grown people, because we won't help them. Give them the jobs that they need. You got all this out, they can pick up trash for $7 an hour. If anybody going to give them a bus pass home, you got good grades to come to school, give them a pass so they can get to work. They ain't got to steal no more. Nobody wants their kids to grow up doing the same thing that we do to live.
Ronnie, we need to move on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Next up, Merle Sango.
These are some of my volunteer teachers. I got a 501(c)(3) I'm filing for a grant. I'm also using my pay for collateral. So in 18 months, when MAP 4 is completed, I plan to have this school built one way or the other, because we're going to do it by the time MAP 4 is completed. And these are my teachers and instructors. They are retired people. They had a good job, working for the city, working for a construction company, plumbers, welders, and there's many more. Thank you. Oh, you're coming.
I don't know if it's still morning or afternoon yet. My phone is off. My name is Merle Sango. I live at 14, oh my God, 1240 Ivy Ridge Court, Edmond. It's a privilege for me to speak with you all today. How are you all today? I'm proud that I am honored that he would ask me to volunteer my services with his program that he's planning and his vision. He has the pillar of a heart of a lion, and he has been an inspiration to me. I'm 64 years old now and still being inspired by this man and where he came from. So I'm honored to be a part of where he's going and his vision. And so we have a couple other guys to do so also.
Thank you for coming
Thank you
down.
for your time.
Mr. Edwards.
Good afternoon. My name is Freddie Edwards, and I'm a retiree. Also a member of the American Legion, Post 157, and also local Union 916. I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps, and I spent 34 years out here at Tinker Air Force Base. 17 of those years I was a federal auctioneer, believe it or not. And I was the first black auctioneer west of the Mississippi. So when I retired, in my sense of thinking, it was time to give back. And I'm going to give you one example that we did, make it very short, that if you all ever heard of that Prince Hall apartment building on Kelly, they had a notorious reputation. Okay, we went over there one season and we got some space from the apartment managers, and we didn't contract with them. We put the bag on McDonald's and Family Dollars and a few more places, and we created a safe spot for those latchkey type of kids when they got out of school. They didn't have anywhere to go. I mean, they couldn't get in their own house, and mother wasn't off from work, and so we created that spot. And we stayed in there about 2 years. Then we had two ordained ministers, Reverend Wise and the Reverend Newbine. Most people know them on that side of town. So it wasn't like a daycare center. It was more like it wasn't like a boot camp, but we let the kids mind develop into what do they think about it, what's on their mind. If it's music, anything besides school. But we're going to do their homework for them. And it worked. Police never got called. And on that third year, the space went away. People said, well, we can't lend you that space anymore, but we're going to do something else with it. It's always something like that. But it costs us $0. And it costs us anything but some attention and a little time. But they knew that they had, and after a while, we saw people dropping their kids off down the street so they could run over that. They didn't live in that apartment complex, but they knew that was a safe spot. And we thought about it through our men's association. Let's create that again if we could do it. But we don't have the space. And the spaces that we were offered were out on Wilshire Boulevard. It wasn't inner city where we grew up at, so it's kind of to the wayside. But that's the thought of the things that can be done that don't cost nothing but a little bit of time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
That's all the tickets I had to sign up. Is there anybody out there?
I have one more ticket.
Real quick, because we got to go, Ronnie.
I'll sign one more ticket. There was over on the northeast side of town, there's an area today has a sign that says Northeast Canadian Riverfront Recreation Area. It's going to be 100 degrees outside in the next 3 or 4 days. We went there for several years, had no problem, but today the sign is still there. Northeast Canadian Riverfront Recreation Area. If we could get there, just some great big stones removed, we could have kids down there in 2 days for the holiday, for these hot seasons. The signs are there today. I have pictures of them. They're supposed to be developing boats like I show them to you, but the signs say Northeast Canadian River Recreation Area. But we can't use it because we can't get into it. It's blocked off. We wish y'all could, we'll even come back on the agenda so somebody can tell us why the stones can't be removed. We'll come back, but it's going to be 100 degrees. Them kids ain't got nowhere to go. We care about them. We'll protect them. We'll feed them. We'll give them a place to go. We'll clean it up. We'll take everything in there. We'll take everything out we bring. But please give these kids someplace to go. We'll do the rest. We'll clean it up. We'll take care of them. We did it for 20 years together at both locations, which was on city properties for years on the North Canadian River. So y'all please think about that, and let's open that area up for the kids. We got people that have to take care of them. We'll give them water, food. They need to have a place to go and enjoy themselves too. It's called Northeast Canadian Riverfront Recreation Area, but it's blocked off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
And thank you. I want to say thank you to all of the men who are here. Thank you for what you're doing in the community. It's much appreciated, and I'll look into that to see how we can get you a place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, council. Thanks a lot.
We have executive session.